Moved by Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Kiley. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Next, that the firm KPMG be appointed as the auditors for the Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation for 2019. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Deputy Mayor Neal, seconded by Councillor Osanik. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Next, that the directors and the terms of membership of the Kingston and Frontenac Housing Corporation for 2019 be confirmed. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor Bone. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Next, the 2019 to 2023 strategic plan be approved, ratified, and confirmed. Can I have a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Bone, seconded by Deputy Mayor Neal. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And finally, that all acts, contracts, bylaws, proceedings, appointments, elections, and payments enacted, made, done, and taken by the directors and officers of the Kingston and Frontenac Housing Corporation since the annual general meeting of June 26, 2018 be hereby approved, ratified, and confirmed. Can I have a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Bone, seconded by Councillor Hutchison. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Is there any other business? Seeing none, the date of our next meeting will be held prior to June the 30th of 2020. And finally, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the annual general meeting. Moved by Deputy Mayor Neal, seconded by Councillor Hutchison. All those in favor? Opposed? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sego ani buju ndio wachia kwekwe. As the mayor of the city of Kingston, I offer these words in the spirit of this gathering. Let us bring our good minds and hearts together as one to honor and celebrate these traditional lands as a gathering place of the original peoples and their ancestors who were entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. It is with deep humility that we acknowledge and offer our gratitude for their contributions to this community, having respect for all as we share this space now and walk side by side into the future. And so just as we do begin our council meeting tonight, again, I would just like to point out that June is National Indigenous Month in Canada, and it is National Indigenous Month in the city of Kingston. And so this Friday, we will, of course, be having our celebrations just out in front of City Hall. But to mark that, I have the talking stick that was a gift from our Indigenous community. I have it on display, again, just to signify the importance of that relationship as we continue on together. So we were meeting in Committee of the Whole closed meeting. We did discuss one item with respect to a corporate organization update, and so I will ask for a motion to rise without reporting, please.
Moved by Councillor Hutchison, seconded by Councillor McLaren, that Council rise from the Committee of the Whole closed meeting without reporting.
Please vote. And that carries. Next, we have the approval of the addeds. We have the addition of a briefing, a motion of congratulations, an additional item for report number 51, and an additional report from the Administrative Policies Committee, and a new motion and an item of miscellaneous business. Can I have a motion to approve the addeds? Thank you. Moved by Deputy Mayor Neal, seconded by Councillor Osanik. Please vote.
One more, please.
And that carries. Okay, are there any disclosures of potential pecuniary interest? Yes, Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. I, Jeff McLaren of the Council of the Corporation of City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of Clause 4, Report Number 51, on the EV charging situation, and in that I own an EV and the associated bylaw 18.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, I, Ryan Bowman, with the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of Info Report 1, 19-175, and Info Report 3, 19-166. As an employee of Utilities Kingston, I declare a conflict insofar as these reports relate to Utilities Kingston. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I, Robert Kiley of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of Clause 1, Report 52, and associated bylaw 4, as I own an adjacent property to 330 Division Street. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other disclosures of pecuniary interest, we'll move on. We don't have any presentations this evening, but we do have several delegations. So first I'll invite Michael Fraser, Vice Principal, University Relations, and Leslie Delsin, Executive Director, Athletics and Recreation, Queen's University, to appear before Council to speak to Clause 6 of Report Number 50, received from the Chief Administrative Officer, with respect to a request for extension of noise exemption, Queen's University, Richardson Stadium. You can come up to the front, and just a reminder to all of our delegations that you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mayor Patterson, and to all members of the Council for the opportunity to speak with you this evening about Queen's noise bylaw exemption request for sports events at Richardson Stadium. As the Mayor said, I'm Michael Fraser, VP of University Relations at Queen's, and with me I'm joined by Leslie Delsin, Executive Director, Athletics and Recreation. We're here tonight because our noise bylaw exemption request has changed from last year. In previous years, the Council has granted Queen's a noise bylaw exemption for up to 15 occurrences of amplified music during games at the stadium on an annual basis between July 1st and July 30th of the following year. Community groups using the stadium would like their own noise exemption if they planned to use amplified music, including the Grenadiers Football Club last year. With multiple exemption requests, the city received questions from the community around total amplified music usage at the stadium. And city staff raised this with Queens and committed to council to work with Queens to combine these into one application for 2019. That is the request you have before you this evening, and the aim is to provide greater clarity to council and the community on total sports-related amplified music at Richardson Stadium. And now I'll turn things over to Leslie, who can speak about the specifics of our exemption request.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone. I will speak to the details of this request, but before I do, I'd like to provide some context about the existing noise mitigation at the stadium. While Richardson Stadium has been in its current form in its current location since 1971, it recently was reconstructed and reopened in 2016. The noise mitigation associated with the new stadium and a new and improved stadium included the move of the stadium 40 feet further away from the houses on Yonge Street, a bowl-shaped design which helped contain sound, a distributed sound system including more speakers, more directed sound, allowing us to lower the overall volume, maximum allowed volume levels established, sound system only operated by Queen's staff, active monitoring and adjustment of sound levels during our games, and Queens remained sensitive to the overall intensity and impact on our community when scheduling games. Since 2016, we've had a successful experience with the stadium and haven't received any complaints with regard to the amplified music played during the games. This slide outlines how our request has changed this year from previous years. So you'll see in the time frame, our previous request was from July 1st to July 30th. We are moving and proposing that we move to a calendar year schedule. This request covers 2 seasons of play until the end of 2020 in order to transition to the new calendar year request. The calendar year aligns better with our league scheduling as well as community group scheduling. Future requests will return to our annual cycle, and based on a calendar year basis, if our noise bylaw exemption is granted this year, our next exemption request would be in the fall of 2020 for the 2021 calendar year. The second change is occurrences. So in the past, Queens has asked for 15 occurrences. This year, we're asking for 12 occurrences plus playoff games. And the reason we're doing that is it provides more certainty in scheduling regular season games. With regard to the playoff position, to put this into context for you, if our football teams and soccer teams make it through the regular season and hosted all playoff games, the maximum number of playoff games we could potentially host is 8. While it would be great for our programs, it's not likely and has not happened in the last decade. For example, we did not host a playoff game at all last year, and our longer-term average is about 3 playoff games a year, so it would take it to 15 games. The third change is related to community groups. In the past, community groups seek their own exemption individually. In this proposal, we're suggesting that we have one request allowing community groups to have a maximum of 20 occurrences. The community groups include the Grenadiers, CASA, the Clippers, etc., and these groups are already using the stadium. This model brings all these exemptions into one request rather than multiple requests that come to the City Council. Queens would then manage the number of occurrences and schedule all of the community use. Under this model, we can better illustrate what the annual field schedule will look like for our neighbors, and we can post comprehensive schedules to the website. A sample would be like the 2019 calendar that was submitted as part of our exemption request. The fourth change is the definition of occurrence. Right now, there's different definitions of an occurrence. For Queens, it's 1 game. For the Grenadiers, it's an 18-block period of time. We're suggesting for continuity and consistency that this be changed to a maximum of 1 6-hour block. and that will standardize the use of the stadium related to all future use. The next one is related to evening games. This request is asking, in the past we've had one occurrence to 10:30. We're asking for 2 occurrences to 9:30. We've had 2 successful seasons with evening games. This year's games are scheduled for August and October.
30
Previously
seconds.
we requested, sorry?
30 seconds.
Okay. Previously requested 10:30 to 10:30. We believe we can manage these requests within a 9:30 limit. And the last one is related to tournaments. This request allow us to manage special event tournaments that have a bid and selection process. For example, if we bid for the University Women's Soccer Championships, these bids involve a selection process requiring us to submit 12 to 18 months in advance. And we're previously in your notes, you would see a 3-day buffer period. We're suggesting that this be changed to a 5-day buffer period based on the feedback from our community council.
Super. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council? Yes, Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, through you, and thank you for your presentation and for streamlining this. It makes it more understandable, at least for me to understand. A question about the proposed calendar, or the example calendar that you mentioned in your presentation that was in our report package. Is it typical that most of these occurrences, as they're called, happen on weekends? Because what I saw was about 4 months of every weekend having games, and I'm wondering if that's what can be expected.
Yes, for the academic programs, for our varsity programs, typically the activities are scheduled on the weekend to avoid conflict with academic schedules. So very limited would we have a weekday game in those circumstances.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
Question, the community sports exemptions, do you know how many there were last year?
Difficult to compare this year to last year, only because the way the occurrences were calculated were different. So if we were to try and compare apples to apples, there was about 16 occurrences last year that would fit within the 20 maximum. The addition would give CASA and groups like the Ultimate Frisbee and things like that the opportunity to play some music at their activities as well.
Right, and the tournaments?
Tournaments, we did not have exemptions previously. Those would have come to council as separate exemptions. This year, we're looking at a one tournament, which is the Canada Cup, which is a national championship for high school football-aged athletes, and it is a 7-day tournament, 5 days of activity with 2 days in between.
See, and
so
that's it?
2 questions, yes, for delegations. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to our second delegation this evening. Karen Burtis, AMHS KFLA Supervisor, will appear before Council to speak to Information Report number 5 with respect to Addictions and Mental Health Services, Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington Staff Report.
Good evening, Mayor Patterson and council members. My name is Karen Birdie. I am the supervisor for Addictions and Mental Health Services, KFLA. On May 21st, Kingston City Council passed a motion directing staff to report back with information on how the proposed changes with AMHS KFLA may impact the supply of affordable housing, the supportive housing, and the city's commitment to ending homelessness. In awareness of information that's coming to council from your staff this evening, it's my pleasure to provide some information on the agency's transformation with a focus on our housing plans. The organization AMHS KFLA is going through significant transformation, and the need for that transformation began with an investigative report initiated by the Southeast LHIN back in 2018. The report did indicate that the agency was not delivering on its core mandate. As a result, the Southeast LHIN appointed a health service provider supervisor, which is myself, in December of 2018. And my responsibility is to take on the role of what the board would have had accountability for in the past, as well as the chief executive officer. And it's to refocus and realign the financial, clinical, leadership, and governance efforts of the agency. A supervisor's role is time limited. It focuses on creating a transformation in an organization or an agency to enable sustainable delivery of excellent quality and accessible services for the agency into the future. It is a term role, and new leadership will be identified as part of the transition. This will include a new CEO and reappointing a board of directors before my term is up. We serve 8,000 clients with serious mental illness and addictions, and we are accountable for serving clients with these needs within our existing budget. For some time now, the agency has not kept pace with advancements in addictions and mental health care and has offered a broad range of services, in some cases more appropriately provided by some of our partners. In addition to the investigators' findings, we've done some broad and extensive consultation, and that continues to occur as our transformation plans are implemented over the next number of months. We've had over 100 partner meetings, and those have been held since I arrived in December to date, and they're ongoing to explore how our community services can be provided by our partners or better structured within our agency to support clients with timely access to programs, services, and enable appropriate client diversion from interactions with police, court services, admissions to the emergency department, and unnecessary hospitalizations. I think a great example to highlight tonight is one of the partnerships that we're working through and will actually be implemented into the fall. And it's a new and exciting partnership with the agency and the Kingston Police in the creation of what is called a crisis outreach and support team, similar to, if you've heard of the COAST model in Hamilton. This team is encompassing the agency, Kingston Police, home-based housing, family and children's services, Maltby Centre, and Kingston Health Sciences Centre. What this will allow our city to do is have two mobile crisis teams. One will be a 911 mobile unit where police get called, uniformed police officer in a police car, and they're going to be riding alongside our crisis worker that's trained in addictions and mental health. The second mobile team will be more of a non-911 mobile crisis team, whereby it's a non-uniformed police officer in an unmarked car, and they'll also travel with one of our crisis workers. One is more of in a crisis, 911, police arrive, but the other one is for any family, friends, or an individual in crisis that may not want a uniformed police officer to come to their home, to wherever they may be. This is a great partnership in effort to avert ED diversions and a great partnership amongst all of the healthcare providers within the city. It's an exciting opportunity as well for our crisis team. They've established very strong relationships with local police services, and they work very, very hard to support appropriate client diversion from hospital emergency departments. We're working on a number of initiatives, but this one I wanted to highlight tonight. What the agency is working towards, we're working towards opening a specialized rehabilitation program with a unique housing model at our 35 Lion Street location for clients that need wraparound support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
30 seconds.
Thank you. I'll skip to this next one then. I want to talk about our housing updates to make sure I cover that. We've divided that into two phases. Phase one are our John Street, Albert Street, West Street, and Lower Union locations. Those clients are all moving to housing within our stock. 25 clients moving to 35 Lion Street, and it's a one-to-one relationship. The remaining of our properties are what we're calling phase two in our plan, and none of these houses are being sold. We are looking for partners that may be wanting to take on some of these homes with existing clients, and if we're unable to find appropriate partners, the agency will retain those housing and keep the housing stock.
Great.
Again, nobody losing homes or a place to live.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council? Yes, Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, with the bringing together of these clients from different locales, I'm presuming that they have complex and different needs. And so, is that, in your estimation, going to work, having people with such varied needs under one roof?
Through Mayor Patterson. So thank you for the question. So yes, we are moving two of our programs to 35 Lion Street specifically. It's our CI housing program and our TRIP program. The way that those programs will be set up within 35 Lions is the staff model that's appropriate for both of those types of clients are moving with them. So we are going to have 18.5 people, individuals for our CI housing clients, and then we've got our staffing model for the TRIP clients. So they will be within the same facility, but staffing models appropriate for the type of client that are within the home, all 24/7.
Councillor Hutchison.
In your description there of the restructuring, you said that you had, were trying to arrange different types of partnerships with different types of partners. It's difficult to tell from any examples there, but does the financial capability of those partners come into this? Or can programs just drop out of sight?
Thank you. So what we have our budget that we're working towards. None of the transformation at AMHS is financially related, so we haven't made any changes to our budget. But as we're looking at partners to potentially partner with or move services appropriately, it is through extensive discussion and consultation with that partner organization to ensure that funding is available between the two organizations, or in the instance where we're potentially transferring a service that we will no longer be providing, the funding that we had for that service has fully transferred over to the partner as a one-to-one relationship.
Yes, Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, and through you. I'd like to pick up on Councillor Hill's question. I'm glad to hear that the staffing models are following the clients to the new build. I'm wondering if you could talk to us about the interaction of the clients in those space, because my understanding is that there are, in fact, very different needs from those different type of clientele, and how them being under one roof, albeit with the staff support that they have now, would work.
No, thank you for the question. So I think one piece to highlight is that we are changing our staffing model within Lion Street. So we're moving to more of a regulated health professional, interprofessional care model. So the team model will be comprised of nurse practitioner, registered nurses, social worker, case managers, peer navigators, peer specialists, and psychiatry. But again, we have certain staffing models attributed to the clientele. So our West and Albert Street are our CI housing programs. The staffing model that is required and needs the support for those potential clients is moving with them. The TRIP clients from John Street have a different staffing model, again 24/7, but the staff that are required to care for those clients will also be within Lion Street. So again, under one roof, but still separate staffing models within that 24/7 model to support the clients within. I think the other piece to highlight is Lion Street is a 43-unit facility. We're moving 25 of our clients over, leaving capacity for 18. And that will be working with partners such as Providence Care and determining what clients will shift into those 18, and the staffing models will be determined.
All right, and one follow-up to that. Is it anticipated that the CI and TRIP clients will interact in Lion Street, or that they will be within their own units?
They're independent units, so they're apartment-style units, but within the space, there's common space, obviously, for clients to meet and have programming within the house. We're also having a common kitchen, so some of our clients aren't able to obviously prepare meals within their rooms. We're having a common kitchen for those clients that need that assistance. So there will be interaction between clients, absolutely, but again, the staffing associated with those clients will be available.
Thank you.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. With your previous presentation, you discussed the time frame of all these changes, and the time frame seemed very short. And so you're introducing a lot of changes for clients, and I'm wondering, and these are clients who already have a lot of concerns, and I'm sure anxiety is an issue that they deal with. How are you helping clients through these huge transition in such a short time frame?
No, thank you for the question. So key to part of our transformation is ensuring that we have met with clients appropriately and families as well to let them know of the changes and where they're going to be living. Our Lion Street facility has had a number of end dates, and so we just received occupancy permit and keys 2 weeks ago. Initially, clients were to move in by the end of June, and we're actually delaying that a little bit to make sure we're ready and that we have the teams in place. So we're keeping clients aware of where we're at, but pausing a little bit on moving them at the end of June.
Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and so moving on to our third delegation this evening, Donald Mitchell, Chair of the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee, will appear before Council to speak to Clause 1 of Report Number 53, received from the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee with respect to the 2019 Facility Accessibility Design Standards.
Good evening, Mayor Patterson, members of Council, City of Kingston staff, and diverse community. On behalf of the City's Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee, or MAC, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you about Kingston's update of the Facility Accessibility Design Standards, or FADs. Joining me are David Williams, the current Built Environment Working Group Chair, and David Greitmeyer, a long-serving MAC member whose contributions reach back to the formation of our city's first Accessibility Advisory Committee. David implied that might be the dawn of history, innovation's origin, or at any rate, Thrive personified. My name is Donald Mitchell, and it has been my privilege to volunteer with the city's accessibility work over the past 4.5 years. Back in 2015, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA, was 10 years young, and already a discussion to update the 2009 FADs had begun. The chair of the Built Environment Working Group at that time was a uniquely qualified retired city engineer. We'd like to share with Council our gratitude for the key volunteer leadership by Robert Baird. It was invaluable to our committee's development and understanding of FADs in the context of a wider consideration of universal and barrier-free design. The working group undertook essentially a line-by-line comparative review of the barrier-free aspects of the province's building code, design of public spaces, and AODA legislations, along with municipal FADs and other relevant city policies and practices. As informed community volunteers, we can confidently offer our support and thanks to the many dedicated members of city staff from all departments that have consciously improved these standards through their ongoing continuous work learnings and project technical comments. It may be that Kingston is leading other municipalities by incorporating into FADs the recent accessibility changes to the Ontario Building Code and design of public spaces legislations. Kingston has been at the forefront of many progressive changes. By example, this city influences, educates, and promotes, be it sustainability or accessibility. Our abundant opportunity of heritage and its stewardship offers a unique challenge for ensuring access for all. Yet with varied perspectives, we all participate daily in making Kingston a welcoming city. We vision this update a living document to be implemented by a conscious municipality. It is 10 years since FAD was first adopted. In less than 5 years, it has been our privilege to witness an organizational shift in removing barriers, a noticeable awareness in the work of the city and its staff of all levels, elected officials and community partners. The examples are just too numerous to mention, but touch all areas from site plan to employment to culture to awareness. We would be remiss not to mention that MAC is deeply indebted to the exceptional performance of Julie Salter-Keene in her active staff role handling the facilitation of all components of the city's accessibility work. It is important work, and many hidden values to this FADS update are a direct result of having such a knowledgeable and productive primary staff person. We appreciate your consideration, and thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from Council? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Okay, yes, Councillor Doherty. Okay, yes, at this point, I will entertain any motions to add delegations. Councillor Doherty.
Okay, I have prepared a motion and have sent it to the clerk. And it reads, moved by Councillor Doherty, seconded by Councillor Hutchison, that section 11.4 and 11.5 of the Council Procedural Bylaw be waived in order to allow Bill Weiser, Vice President of Kingston Association of Museums, to speak with respect to approval of the administrative plan, City of Kingston Heritage Fund 2019 to 2020.
Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Doherty, seconded by Councillor Hutchison. Please vote. And that carries. Are there any other delegations to add? Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, so we have one last delegation. So at this point, I will invite Mr. Bill Visser to come and speak to council with respect to the item city administration of the Heritage Fund. That's clause 3 of report number 51.
Good evening, Mayor Patterson, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight on this. My name is Bill Visser, and I am the Vice President of the Kingston Association of Museums, Art Galleries, and Historic Sites Board of Directors. I'm here this evening along with our newly appointed Managing Director, Jamie McKenzie-Nash, to speak to the significance of City of Kingston's Heritage Fund and CAM's role in administering it. You have a busy night, so I will get straight to the point. The City of Kingston Heritage Fund is an innovative and incredibly important municipal investment in Kingston's cultural heritage sector. With opportunities for operational, investment, and project funding, the City of Kingston Heritage Fund grant program supports local museums and other cultural heritage venues and organizations through program development, capacity building for organizations through program development, I just said that, didn't I? Market readiness and professional development. This type of investment in museums and cultural heritage organizations serves to support and enrich vibrant, diverse, and culturally active citizen communities. While I say the fund is innovative in a sense that it is both providing operational and project funds, it is also reflective of the City of Kingston's long-standing commitment to the value of cultural heritage and its understanding of how cultural heritage threads throughout our community as citizen dialogue, expression, engagement, and an economic driver. The Kingston Association of Museums, Art Galleries, and Historic Sites first emerged over 30 years ago as a locally initiated professional support network to promote public awareness and to increase engagement across Kingston's cultural heritage sites. In its inception, CAM was driven by the ideal that by working collaboratively, despite differences in size, mandates, and resources, cultural heritage sites and organizations could, quite simply, do better together, improving practices and strengthening their connections within and across communities. Over the years, CAM has evolved in scope and activity as an organization, but this originating spark remains as true and as relevant today as it did 30-odd years ago. 10 years ago, CAM officially incorporated, with the help of the City of Kingston Cultural Services, to get some of our ducks in line, and it has for the past 7 years administered the Heritage Fund on behalf of the City of Kingston. As a professional network and resource hub within Kingston's cultural heritage landscape, CAM is well situated to support, develop, and advance the Heritage Fund. It is our privilege to continue to work in partnership with the City of Kingston to administer and champion the next iteration of this program. Thank you for your time and your support.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegation? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, so at this point we have no further delegations, so we will move on in the agenda. We do have one briefing. Greg Newman, Manager of Policy Planning, Building and Licensing, will provide introductory remarks and will introduce John Williamson, Chair of the Source Protection Committee, and Katrina Furlanetto, Manager of Watershed Planning and Engineering, Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority, who will brief Council with respect to Information Report Number 1 regarding drinking water source protection overview.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Good evening, everyone. As introduced, my name is Greg Newman. I'm the Manager of Policy Planning, and I also sit on the Source Protection Committee as a municipal rep. Here with me tonight is John Williamson, the Chair of the Source Protection Committee, and Katrina Furlanetto, the Manager of Watershed Planning and Engineering with the Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority. We're here tonight just to provide a little information about what source water protection is and what the City of Kingston is doing to protect your drinking water. So with that, I'll turn it over to Katrina to start.
Thanks, Greg. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and fellow council members. Source water is the untreated water from lakes, rivers, and groundwater used to supply drinking water to our local residents. The Ontario government created the Drinking Water Source Protection Program in 2007 under the Clean Water Act as a response, thank you, to the Walkerton tragedy in 2000 to protect existing and future sources of drinking water from contamination and overuse. This program, through the province, created 19 source protection areas and regions, each one with a local source protection plan, which outlines policies and roles and responsibilities of municipalities and stakeholders to properly manage activities on the landscape to reduce possible contamination to our drinking water sources. In doing so, local source protection committees were formed, and they represent the body of review to look at the technical expertise and to review how science can be used to create policies to enforce those activities from potentially contaminating our drinking water sources. So the City of Kingston is one of 15 municipalities within the Cataraqui Source Protection Area, which spans from Greater Napanee to Brockville upwards towards Westport and includes the township of Frontenac Island. Within this area, there is the Cataraqui Source Protection Plan, which is a plan that consists of 144 policies speaking to land use planning, education, research, and risk management of these specific activities. The City of Kingston is responsible for 37 of the 144 policies within this plan. As I mentioned, the plan is based on science and consultation, which was reviewed by the committee. And last year, the committee reviewed the plan as it stands to date on the implementation success to develop a work plan on how to improve these policies and include information to address gaps that were left within the document. And that has been submitted to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks for review, and work to improve the plan will begin in 2019. So source protection works in collaboration with the drinking water treatment plant operation, which the city currently works on, and is the first step or the first barrier in a multi-barrier approach to protecting our drinking water sources. So within the City of Kingston, there are 3 drinking water systems out of the 12 systems within the Cataraqui Source Protection Area. They include the Cana Wellhead Protection Area, the Point Pleasant Surface Water Intake Protection Zone, as well as Kingston Central Surface Water Intake Protection Zone, as seen on the map here. So each of these areas during the scientific assessment were looked at for their vulnerability to contamination, and they were modeled, as you can see here, with different zones. Each of those zones were then scored based on their vulnerability, and policies were created to ensure that activities within each of those zones were properly managed to ensure that the risk to contamination of those sources was reduced. So in looking at that a little further, on the cleanwatercataraqui.ca website, each of these zones can be zoomed in, and there are interactive maps where you can look for your specific property as a resident, or municipal staff can look at different areas that might want development or other activities to determine what the vulnerability score is and what policies relate, and whether prohibition, restricted uses, or risk management plans are required to allow those activities to take place. And this is the same also for our intake protection zones. So the different areas can be zoomed in and interacted on the website to understand what those responsibilities are. In terms of reviewing the implementation success of the plan, all municipalities, including the City of Kingston, are required to report on their implementation success to the Cataraqui Source Protection Authority. So the City of Kingston has been reporting over the last several years and has done a really great job in terms of ensuring implementation and success of those policies and is nearing completion. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Greg to talk about some of the roles that the city has done and the progress on those policies.
Thank you. So the city's role is multi-tiered. We have implemented land use controls, and we continue to implement new land use controls, in particular around those intake or the wellhead protection areas. We have prepared risk management plans. In fact, recently, Council approved of the retention of cambium to undertake the preparation of risk management plans around the Cana wellhead protection area. We continue to try and do education and outreach like things like tonight. Source water protection is a component of emergency planning, and it's a key component of the monitoring and inspection of the city's waste treatment infrastructure. So our progress to date, we are 95% complete implementing all of the policies that apply to the City of Kingston with respect to source water protection. We've incorporated land use planning policies within the official plan, so as part of the 2017 official plan update, we introduced a new section, Section 5A, as well as the schedule that you saw, the map that illustrates the location of source water protection areas. We're 100% completed the risk management plans, so these are individual property owner specific risk management plans that deal with things like the storage of gasoline or the maintenance of oil furnaces and that sort of thing. We've installed road signs along Highway 15. We've continued, and I think this one is particularly important, continued the separation of our combined sewer system, and we've introduced real-time overflow notification systems. I've highlighted in a different color here the ongoing implementation of a pollution control plan. In the report, it says we're 93% complete. We're actually closer to 95% complete because we do, in fact, have a pollution control plan. The remaining 5% of the policies are non-binding policies. Next year, we will address one of them, which is the preparation of a salt management plan. And we're also ongoing in the sharing of data, which is the other non-binding policy. Lastly, as Katrina mentioned, we will be updating the source protection plan at some point in the future, and we want the plan to recognize local and provincial policies and procedures as it relates to source water protection. We want the plan itself to recognize the upgrades that the City of Kingston has invested and made to its treatment infrastructure and the findings of scientific research and local experience. So, if time permits, I have about a 1-minute long video I'd like to show Council and the public, and I'll get that started. And it's not letting me. Those interested in the video are encouraged to check out Conservation Ontario. If you go to the website, in fact, it actually shows before movie screenings at the Cineplex. So check it out. Oh, maybe it'll work. No. All right, moving on. The other thing I just wanted to direct Council to are the upgrades that we've made to the city's webpage. So if you go to the search bar on the City of Kingston webpage and you type in water quality, you will get access to all the information that we've presented tonight and hopefully be able to find the video through a link there as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from Council? Councillor Stanek.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the briefing. I just wondered if you could speak to what the liability could be to City Council to support source water protection and ensuring, like high quality water standards.
Sure. Through you, Mayor Patterson, I'll speak to the way the source protection plan has established policies. So the source protection plan has legally binding policies. And I will say that the City of Kingston is 100% compliant with the legally binding policies, things like having emergency response plans and real-time monitoring of the operation of treatment facilities. I can't speak to the liability that the city would incur if there were a failure to happen. Sure.
So just to build on what Greg was saying, under the Safe Drinking Water Act, the city has a due diligence to provide treatment to ensure clean and safe drinking water, and so that's the same through the Drinking Water Source Protection Program, that the municipality and council has that same due diligence to ensure that our sources of water from the first step that I mentioned earlier are protected. Thanks.
Yes, Councillor Ostroff.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Thanks for your report, and this is really vital stuff, and I get what you're saying, and I think we do a great job. And I was wondering, from a rural perspective, is there also such a document or an effort or investigation out there, or is there something for us in the rural community that we know is standing there, that we also have a mindset to protect our water sources? I mean, there's a connection. We know that there's water flows toward the river, and I understand that. But I was wondering, is there a document that also gives the rural residents some comfort?
Through you, Mayor Patterson. So I'll just jump up to this map here that we showed, and it's a little difficult to see on the screen here, but this is Schedule 11B to the city's official plan. This is a schedule that illustrates not only the intake protection zones within Lake Ontario, so where we draw our water, as well as the Cana Wellhead protection area, but you can see in the coloring on the map where we've identified highly vulnerable aquifers, which encompasses the majority of the city's rural lands. And this is ultimately illustrating the fact that we sit on a limestone plain and there's not a lot of overburden, and there's a lot of connectivity within the fractured nature of our limestone. So in the review of development applications in the rural area, water quality, water quantity are fundamental considerations.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Chappelle.
Through you, Your Worship, thank you. Currently, in rural communities, do you have any wells that draw more than 20,000 liters a day?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Not to my knowledge in the rural parts of our jurisdiction.
If you had a well that drew 20,000 liters a day, would that be of concern to the Cataraqui Conservation Authority?
High level, yes. It would require a permit to take water, and that would be reviewed by the ministry, and then we would receive that application as well and look at it from a source protection angle.
I was reviewing the...
So two questions.
Okay.
Two questions. Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much. Okay. We have no other briefings. Councillor Chappelle, I apologize. That was a briefing, so actually questions are unlimited. So if you had a follow-up question, if you folks are okay to take it, I apologize. That's okay? Okay, sorry about that. Yes, it's 2 questions on a delegation, but unlimited questions on a briefing. Okay, so moving on. Are there any petitions to present? Okay, seeing none, we do have a couple of motions of congratulations. First, moved by Mayor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Neal, that the congratulations of Kingston City Council be extended to the Kingston Humane Society in celebration of their 135th anniversary. The Kingston Humane Society was founded in 1884 to provide shelter and care for homeless animals and investigate cases of animal cruelty in Kingston and surrounding communities. They promote responsible pet ownership and compassion and respect for all animals and are committed to advocating for and improving the lives of animals within our community. Congratulations, Kingston Humane Society, on 135 years of animal care. Moved by Mayor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that the congratulations of Kingston City Council be extended to the Toronto Raptors for their historic victory of the NBA championship on Thursday, June 13th of 2019, and for bringing a nation together with hope and hard work. Go Raps, go. We will call the vote, please. And that carries. Okay, we have no deferred motions, so we will move to reports. First, we have report number 50 from the CAO.
Moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Osterhoff, that report number 50 from the Chief Administrative Officer, consent, be received and adopted.
Okay, so there are 9 clauses. Would anyone like any of those clauses separated? Councillor Kiley.
Number 3, please.
I'm sorry, number 3?
3, yeah.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Stroud.
Number 6, please.
6. Okay, so seeing no other separations, we'll first vote on the balance of the clauses. So clause 1, award of contract, fuel for corporate fleet. Clause 2, award of contract 1 2020 model year forestry aerial truck. Clause 4, patio application Namaste Kingston. Clause 5, confederation based on lease with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Clause 7, declare surplus and exchange extension of MacIver Road lands. Clause 8, public engagement and online platform contract renewal with Bang the Table. And Clause 9, agreement to supply recycling processing services to the Corporation of the Township of Central Frontenac. Please vote. And that carries. Okay, so back to Clause 3, purchase of airport trailer mounted chemical sprayer. Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, and through you to staff, I'm wondering why the city buys this equipment and why the commercial airlines don't either provide some of the funds for this or buy it themselves.
Acting CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So it is actually a couple of things. First, this equipment is actually necessary, especially for winter conditions when we have ice. So it's to try to deal with that in terms of the anti-icing material and what we need to make sure is on the runway so that airplanes can actually fly in and out. And it is quite usual for airports to actually purchase that equipment. It's usually not something that each carrier would purchase on their own. It's something that the airport authority itself would actually purchase and own and maintain.
Thank you. And follow up to that, then in their hangar fees, for lack of a better word, I don't know the technical term, are they paying to use that equipment that we provide for them? How does that work as far as how we can start to recuperate the cost of this heavy equipment?
Who would like to take that? Commissioner Kidd.
Through you, Your Worship. The airport fees that are collected by the airlines and the passengers all go to fund the equipment, and the equipment is operated by municipal staff.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will call the vote on Clause 3. Please vote. And that carries. Clause 6, request for extension of noise exemption, Queen's University Richardson Stadium. Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is adjacent to my district and Councillor Doherty's Portsmouth district. I met with Queen's a couple of times. Although I missed the delegation tonight, I am very familiar with what's being proposed, but I just had a couple of questions for staff as how this fits in with the noise bylaw so that it's clear what it is that we're asking to vote on. It's quite a large item with many exemptions, so I just want to make sure we know what we're voting on before that happens. So the question to staff is, so it's clear from the clauses that there's a duplication of identical exemptions for 2019 and 2020. I'm assuming it was explained by the delegation that that's because of the harmonization of the to go to a calendar year from January to December, which makes a lot of sense, and that's fine. The question is really the exemption itself from the noise bylaw. It seems to be mostly around amplified music. Is that a fair generalization?
Yes, Ms. Turner.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, that is correct. The exemption is for the amplified music.
Okay, so I guess to my colleagues, that's what we're essentially voting on, is to allow, although the bylaw says no amplified music at any time, the bylaw is to allow multiple occurrences of amplified music for the dates, and this is to accommodate, as you probably heard from the delegation, the Queen's Athletic events, which, because of the league requirements, all participants in the varsity athletics leagues require amplified music to be allowed at the stadium. So that's where that's coming from. It's actually coming from the varsity leagues themselves, and then that's the ones that have to do with the Queen's athletics, right? And then there's the ones for the community events, and that would be for when the facilities are rented to community players, such as, for example, the Grenadiers Football Club and other organizations such as the Junior Gales and team sports organizations like that. So I guess the question would be, does staff anticipate the number of amplified music occurrences to be, although the request for exemption is a large number, is staff anticipating, from the information that they have to date, all of these exemptions being used to add up to dozens of occurrences per calendar year?
Ms. Turner?
Through you, Your Worship, through our conversations with Queen's University, no, we don't expect it to meet the occurrences that are listed in the report. We're talking about very few games that actually require amplified music. Some of them will be at the varsity level, at the Queen's level, and the odd other occurrence may be with a special event. Or one of our community groups who may have a tournament there, but we don't expect it to come anywhere near the occurrences that are listed in the report.
Okay, and I also have the knowledge that the stadium itself was redesigned and by all accounts is less intrusive to the neighborhoods than it was before. But that's not to say that it's not intrusive. And so I was going to you don't have to answer this question because I know it to be true. The noise system, or the sound system itself, when it's playing amplified music, is under the control of a Queen's employee who's trained on the system at all times and cannot be accidentally set to levels that might be very disruptive to the community because of the very specific training that those employees that run the sound system receive from Queen's. Is that correct?
Through you, Your Worship, that is correct.
Okay, so then really the only question that remains to me, and this is the real question, if we know that this isn't going to be needed very many times, that it's not going to, there aren't going to be that many events that apply, why did staff not encourage the applicant to request a fewer number of exemptions to ensure that it isn't too frequent?
Through you, Your Worship, with our conversations with Queen's, so it was on one of the slides that in the presentation from the delegation so what had happened in the past is that Queen's had approximately 15 occurrences. The Grenadiers Football Club had up to 18 occurrences. But what has also happened in the past year or so is there's a Junior Gales program. So that encompasses more of our community groups, youth associations. For example, the Cataraqui Clippers would be one of those groups. So it's to give the opportunity to take into account what has happened in the past, to also take into account the fact that what has been deemed as an occurrence has changed, and that was mentioned in the presentation. And just to give the opportunity for those types of occurrences to happen. So to go from what was a per game occurrence up to a 6-hour block in order to encompass Queen's whole program. So that's why we've gone with the numbers in the report.
Great, thank you. How much time do I have left, Your Worship?
You have just under 1 minute.
Okay, I'll just close with a comment and a suggestion. So the comment is that this is really just because of the amplified music. So nowadays, sports entertainment, it's sort of a blurry line between the two. You can't have sports without entertainment. You can't have sports without, recorded music. Sometimes disturbing, the peace and quiet of the neighborhoods. It's really too bad because the people that live in the neighborhood may not have been aware of this requirement of the varsity leagues when they bought their houses, and now they're finding out the hard way that this is just the way things are nowadays. And we either have to prevent the varsity teams from playing, or we have to allow the noise exemptions. And my suggestion to staff would be have another look at the noise bylaw in the future, because, you know, doing dozens of exemptions every year is really not a sustainable practice, and really the bylaw maybe ought to be revised. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. I would like to gauge concerns around this issue because, as Councillor Stroud, I attended a couple of meetings with Queens, and one was a public meeting, and some of the people that attended had been involved over the years, and they commented that they're very pleased with the many changes that were implemented to address the sound and the lighting issues. But in Queens said tonight that they have received no concerns at all, but I know I received concerns, emails from constituents, and I wonder if staff is receiving concerns and how we're keeping track of these concerns.
Ms. Turner?
Through you, Your Worship, the concerns that have been brought forward have come through to Queen's University. Those concerns have been dealt with in a very timely manner. And the few calls that we have received through to the Licensing and Enforcement Division, by the time that we have called back or made contact with Queen's, those issues have been dealt with already.
Could you give an example of what issues could be dealt with quickly? Because I'm trying to imagine a game that's going on with amplified sound, and how could you resolve an issue like that? I also want to note that apparently there are only 2 games that are going to 9:30, so perhaps the time factor is not a huge issue, but how can you deal with an issue of amplified sound quickly?
Through you, Your Worship. So what Queen's has done is they've provided a number which members of the community can call. And my understanding is what happens is a staff person is dispatched out to the facility to deal with the issue. Now, in saying that, also part of this report part of the conversation has been in the past that Queen's also has staff there that is monitoring the sound system and that are trained to keep the system at certain levels.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Hill.
It seems to me, and I could be wrong, being a rookie councillor, but that this must come to us every year. And is there? And I guess I'm asking staff: is there a means by which we could approve, sort of on a go-forward basis, a certain number of these exemptions, so that it doesn't have to come before council, other than sort of where it really is an exception to the rule? Because this seems to me like something council must go through every year, somewhat unnecessarily, I would think.
Ms. Turner.
Through you, Your Worship. So what has happened in the past is that we have come forward on an annual basis. Why we've come forward now with the format that we have is to help also Queens with their scheduling for their varsity games for the year. So that's why we're here with requests for 2019, and then also to carry over the schedule into 2020, to carry the varsity schedule over into 2020. And then once that is complete, we'll be back on an annual basis for the 2021 schedule.
So I guess just as a follow-up to that, my question really is, like, if we're going to approve 20, let's use the number 20 of these every year, why is that not sort of a standing commitment, and then where they go beyond 20, then we would approve those separately?
Acting CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So amplified sound obviously is not permitted under the bylaw. So right away, it is an exemption that's required. In the past, councils have, I think, had the desire to see the requests come back on a yearly basis and review the request, because things may have changed as well from year to year. which is a reason why these applications have been made. If council was interested in providing a multi-year exemption agreement, that's something that we could look into and entertain if that's something that would be of interest.
Okay. Seeing no other questions. Oh, yes, Councillor Hutchison.
Question to the acting CEO. This is for 2019, 2020, so is it not by definition a multi-year request?
Acting CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. It is actually based on the actual year of play, if you wish. So it's not necessarily based on a calendar year, but rather the time frame that the fields are being used for.
Okay. I got to admit that I've been listening to this for 13 years now, and it seems to me that there's noise request creep. That's where something keeps increasing. Yes, there are adjustments and bits and pieces and people monitoring and all that sort of thing, but the complaints continue. And frankly, from my point of view, I don't see why amplified music is needed, maybe for the varsity programs, because they've always been really loud anyway. And I can remember complaints from decades ago about certain types of chants and so on. So I looked at this pretty carefully, and I see that they've got 12 events for the Queen's part, 20 for the non-Queens, and 15 for multi-day sports tournaments. Add that up, that's 47 event days. Most of them, it seems to me, take place within 5 months, 6 months. And if you look at the multi-day sports tournaments, they have to have 3 days between a multi-day, right? So you spread that out, you get 36 days of intermittent but consistent noise presence. Now, going back and looking at the noise bylaw, that's all about disturbance, discomfort, and the right to peace and enjoyment of your property. And I personally think we've done enough. Okay? We've done enough. We've tried to accommodate it. I really don't see why the multi-day sports tournaments need amplified music. They've got whistles, they've got announcements, and then they want amplified music. Why? What's the argument? Is it enough to allow for the disturbance of a neighbor? More than one neighborhood. There are neighborhoods all around. And I just don't see that it's justified. I mean, this is not about amateur sport and community and doing things in the community. As someone pointed out in the letters, this is more like a profit-making enterprise. In which case, I don't have the same interest. So, unless somebody comes up with a really good argument, I'm going to vote against this. And I will also suggest that we should be doing it on a yearly basis, as is suggested by a former councillor, that we cut it down to 1 year, 2019. And so I'm going to make a motion to that effect. And so my motion is to amend it so to remove the references to 2020.
Okay. So, Councillor Hutchison, you are moving a motion to amend the staff recommendation.
That's right.
To remove all references to 2020.
It's okay.
Just give me a second. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Stroud. Mr. Clerk, can I see you for a moment?
Yeah.
Okay, so just to clarify, the motion to amend that is on the floor is effectively to delete the second paragraph, the fourth paragraph, and to amend the fifth paragraph when it says at the last line, to the manager of licensing enforcement at the end of each month between June 19th, 2019 and December 31st, 2020. That would read at the end of each month between June 19th, 2019 and December 31st, 2019. Okay, so there is a motion to amend on the floor. Everyone's clear with what the motion to amend is. Councillor Hutchison, is there anything else that you wish to say to the motion?
Sure. Just very briefly, I have voted for these things in the past, okay? And for some of the creep, frankly, I've been around long enough. And I just find that this is supposed to be an administrative thing that makes it clear, but actually weakens the control of council over this. And I think at some point, the concerns of the neighborhoods who are not complaining, I think, in some cases, simply because they're worn out, it's got to come to an end. I understand that it's more convenient to vote for this, but to me, it's not the right thing, okay? You have to decide for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there anybody that wishes to speak to the amendment? And again, this is to the amendment only at this point, not to the main motion. So that would be to speaking to changing the timeline from allowing the exemption to the end of 2020 to instead just to the end of 2019. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, I think we're going in exactly the wrong direction if we support this amendment. And the reason I would say that is we're finally getting an engagement with the university where they're supporting our community clubs and programs and providing access to the facilities and commitment to that access to the facilities over the years. We should be going in the opposite direction, and that is to say, we welcome this. We want our young people in our community to be able to be participants and use these facilities, and we want to support Queens as our partners. And I think this is going in exactly the wrong direction, given all of the efforts that Queens has made to address these sound issues, and I think to great success. So I would not be supporting this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. A question about time to staff. Would eliminating references to 2020 interrupt any of the team's season that we know of for sure?
Ms. Turner.
Through you, Your Worship, with our discussions with Queen's University, it would make it difficult for their scheduling for their varsity games, yes.
Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the amendment only? Councillor Stroud.
I'm going to mention one pro and one con to this amendment. The pro, which I think probably is stronger, the pro is the question of the complaints. So Councillor Doherty mentioned this. I am also aware of this, and it was a question at the public meeting as well. The lack of the lessening of the complaints, or the lack of complaints, or there's very few incidences of complaints that Queens is fielding, it is not consistent with what Councillor Doherty and I have experienced, especially when asked. So there's spontaneous complaints that are reactionary complaints, but then there's complaints when you go door to door and you say, what do you think of the stadium? How has it been? Is it getting better? So those opinions of the near neighbors are real, and if they don't participate in the process by directly calling the university or our bylaw officers, it's like we're being told that they don't exist. And that's actually the problem. That's the reason why this is a lingering thing that Councillor Hutchinson was saying. The reason why the complaints never completely go away is there's this resignation and feeling that they're being ignored. So we do have to do the right thing. And okay, so to the amendment, if we only grant it till the end of this year, we have to revisit it for 2020 very soon. And that gives us a chance to actually go and get a reaction from the community. It puts it in a way, lights a fire under us as councillors to find out what the community is saying from this season before we approve next season. Now, we could also approve the 18 months and do the same thing in late 2020 or at this time in 2020 for 2021, and it will only be 1 year at a time at that point. I think that maybe the correct compromise is to just keep doing it year by year, as the CAO was saying. But I'm okay with the amendment because all it really does is force us to talk about it again in a few months. That's not the end of the world. I think once we come to the end of the discussion, we'll hopefully find something that's a win-win for everyone. So I'm willing to support the amendment, but you know, if it fails, we can still address everything in a year's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the amendment? Deputy Mayor, would you take the chair?
I will indeed, and I recognize you.
Thank you. I think I'll keep my comments short. Obviously, we have set a pattern that we address this on a year-to-year basis. One of the reasons why we do that is so that we can flag concerns or issues, that we can obviously respond and make changes. And I think that that's the compromise that we agreed to strike. So what we're talking about is, obviously, at this time, the timing is awkward, so we're not going to do a year extension, so it's either 6 months or 18 months. My personal feeling is that given the consultation has been very clear around this 18 months, that's the transparency. We've heard that there will be scheduling problems if we try to shorten it to 6 months. Quite frankly, I understand and very sympathetic to the concerns of the neighbors, but I think Queens has also demonstrated great effort to try to address those concerns as much as humanly possible. And I think that it's reasonable in this case to go 18 months and then we can review for a year's time. So for that reason, I would encourage council not to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, and I return the chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchison, it is your motion to amend. If there's anything else that you wish to say, you can have the floor before we take the vote.
One thing, a couple of things, is I understand however we vote. My premises are this, that amplified music is really not justified in a lot of these cases. You can play the games, you can have a good time, you can be part of the community, and that all I support, and I'm happy the field's there for that purpose. But when do you draw the line when people are just trying to live their lives? They've got children to put to bed. I was going to ask a question that the Mayor quite rightly didn't allow me to ask, but I'll ask it now, not expecting an answer. But 10 years ago, did they have evening games, varsity games?
So here's what I would say to that. So that's a question for the main motion, not the motion to amend.
Sure.
So you'll still have the floor after we vote on the amendment one way or the other, and so then that's when you can ask that question.
Sure, I'm fine.
Okay, so at this point then we will vote on the motion to amend with respect to removing the references to 2020. So please vote. And that loses by a vote of 2 to 10. So Councillor Hutchison, you still have the floor and you have 3 minutes and 30 seconds remaining on the clock. So if you want to ask that question at this point, maybe you can just re-ask the question because I forget what it was.
Oh, well, the question I was asking was, did 10 years ago they have evening games for the varsity? And if they don't have the answer, I think the answer is no. But I have another question that's much more important.
So, Ms. Turner.
Through you, Your Worship, my understanding is the university wasn't able to have games that long ago because the field did not have lights.
So I was in on that, and that was a whole other issue. So the question that I think my seatmates and I would like to know is how many event days were there actually last year? And because it was told to us by staff that they didn't expect them to get up to this limit, which is, I take to be 47 event days.
Okay, so the question is how many event days actually occurred in 2018?
Yes, I guess that's, there's the problem of in the year. In the year.
Or in the last year.
However they define their year.
Okay. Ms. Turner.
Through you, your worship, my understanding is that there was a combined between the varsity, so the Queens and the community, there were 33 games last season in total.
So I think I've done my bit. So if somebody wants to raise the question of why we should allow more than 35, like, why should we, right? So someone may want to bring that forward.
Okay, thank you. So next on this, so we're back to the main motion. Next on this is Deputy Mayor Neal.
Thank you. A few years ago, when they first expanded the playing fields and had many more community games going on, I supported the district councillors at that time. That was 5 or 6 years ago, I believe, because there were legitimate concerns. I agree with some of the previous speakers. Queens has gone a long way in trying to address those concerns. I believe, and I lived on Tremor Avenue, and with my neighbors used to sit on the front porch and listen to the game, and you didn't have to go to the game to follow it. I now live near the Memorial Center, where we have the fair every fall. There are communities within the city, and I know this won't endear me to everybody, but the reality is that we live in a city, and we can't expect to have no sound. I remember way back when I represented Sydenham District, and people complained after they were building the apartments along Ontario Street about the bar noise when the bars were getting out. Well, Ontario Street had bars long before they had high-rises. And the reality is that we make choices in our lives to live where we choose to live. And, you know, I know that people often talk about what a great place countryside is to live and how quiet it is there. But those are choices that people make. And so I will be supporting this. I haven't always supported the recommendations that have come forward, but I think it's time for us to recognize that Queens has made an effort to address these. The stadium definitely reduces the amount of noise given its reconstruction. So I think we should give them an opportunity to prove that they've done the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I do want to pursue the numbers that are requested versus the actual numbers last year, plus the potential for playoff games, because I remember that was a comment from the delegation earlier in the evening. So 35 last year, 33 last year, 8 possible playoff games would bring us to 41, and the request is for 47. Is my math right?
42. 47.
Ms. Turner?
Through you, your worship, yes, that is correct.
All right, and therein for me lies the problem, because we heard also earlier that pretty much all these games, all these occurrences will be on the weekend. And if you looked at the calendar that we received as an example, that's pretty much every weekend of the summer that residents in these districts will be hearing this noise. And it is part of living in a community, and I think that is a good thing, and it's an amazing thing that Queens has been so accommodating. But if we are able to even bring down the number of asked for occurrences, the difference, the 33 actual plus 8 possible playoff games to 41, if we bring the motion from 47 to 41, that's up to 3 weekends that we're giving residents in this area a break. So I'd like to move an amendment to have the total at 41 as opposed to 47.
Okay. So we have a motion to amend from 47 down to 41. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Stroud. Mr. Clerk, can I see you for a moment? So Councillor Kiley, so the issue is that the number 47 does not appear in the recommendations, so you're going to have to be more specific about what number it is that you're looking to change.
If we were to take away from the non-Queens number, would that impact the community groups who are expecting to use that, or has that number been inflated with a buffer for the possibility of potential Queens playoff games? It's a question to help understand where we could perhaps get those 3 weekends for the residents.
Ms. Turner?
Through you, Your Worship, I think where the problem would lie is within the special event component, so the Canada Cup, which is an event that has already been committed to for July.
All right, to make sure that I understand that correctly, so the 47 are committed to in this sports year.
Ms. Turner?
My understanding is, through you, Your Worship, I'm sorry, my understanding is between the Canada Cup and the varsity schedule, and also the community groups, that yes, it would be tight for the schedule for the occurrences.
All right, with that said, I'll withdraw my amendment, but I do think we should recognize if there are days that aren't needed, I don't think we should be permitting those going forward, because again, people living in this area have every single weekend with this noise, and if there are 3 weekends that we can give them rest, I think we should do that. But given the fact that this is already committed to, and I have no desire to interfere with sports in our community, I withdraw my amendment.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Just as I read this right now, it says that it's basically between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Is that correct? It ends at 9 p.m.?
Ms. Turner?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, that is correct, except for the exception of 2 occurrences, which would go to 9:30 p.m.
Okay, right. So based on some comments earlier, and there was some comments about, like living in the rural area, if you want big open spaces and lots of quiet versus living in the city. And I just wanted to raise those comments up to a higher level and think about where everybody'd be right now if and when our Queens wins the next championship. We'd all be celebrating that. There'd be motions of congratulations and everything like that. This is the trade-off to have a world-class institution like Queens in our city. This is something where when you have institutions of that level, there has to be some sort of compromise between the community and that institution. They're large, they bring in a lot of sports tourism, they bring in awareness to Kingston that I don't think would exist if they were not here. So there will be at times some discomfort with that, but at the same time, I can probably go to almost any neighborhood in the city and there will be noise up until 9 or 9:30 p.m. in the evening. That's just kind of a reasonable hour, even especially on the weekends. Noise complaints come in all the time because the neighbor next door is having a party too loud and it's after 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. So, this is something where I think it's rational and reasonable to allow up to 9 p.m. and then 2 extended instances of an extra half hour for a city of Kingston to have a good relationship with Queens, especially with all the benefit we derive from that relationship and the amount of sports tourism. We are trying to market Kingston as a sports tourism town, so to turn this down and then try to go and do economic development on the other side, it's your Robin Peter to pay Paul. So these things work together intrinsically and need to coexist. Thank you. So I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Chappelle.
I'd just like to thank Councillor Bohm for reading my notes.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, will you take the chair?
I will, and I recognize you.
Thank you again. I'm going to be very brief. I think that Councillor Boehm summed it up very well. I think the only other point that I would make here is that this is really less the city in Queens. This is really being driven by community groups and others that want to use a state-of-the-art facility that we happen to have in our community. So I think that there is a trade-off. We even heard about how the noise issues are better with the newly rebuilt stadium. So now we have a newly rebuilt stadium. So I think it's fair and reasonable. Again, understanding the concerns the neighbors have. That's why we're doing these noise exemption requests. That's why we're having these conversations, to really force these issues to the surface. Certainly, I think, again, we should reward the work that has been done to try to address them. But ultimately, when you have a state-of-the-art facility and you have community groups that are wanting to use it, that ultimately is what's going on here. So I think striking this balance, what I see before me, I think finds that. And so I would encourage council to vote for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I return the chair.
Okay, we will call the vote on Clause 6. Please vote. And that carries by a vote of 9-3. Okay, so that is everything from report number 50, so we will now move to report number 51 from the CAO.
Moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor Hill, that report number 51 from the Chief Administrative Officer recommend be received and adopted clause by clause.
Okay, so our first clause is the write-off of uncollectible property taxes and vesting of lands, portion of Little Cataraqui Creek West Branch. Yes, Councillor Sanik.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support this recommendation. I just want to thank staff for bringing it forward for us to, buy it. So this now fills in the west branch of the Little Cataraqui Creek valley lands that the CRCA and the city started to accumulate back in the 1980s and 1990s as between Malabar Drive and Centennial Drive. And even though it's just under 2 acres, it fills it in so that we own all of that wetland area. And we saw in strategic planning that lots of people wrote to us to say that supporting our wetlands was really important, increasing our green space, and now it will be under city ownership. So thank you.
Thank you. So we will call the vote on Clause 1. Please vote. And that carries. Clause 2, 2019 final capping limits for commercial, industrial, and multi-residential properties. You'll call the vote, please.
Two more, please.
And that carries by a vote of 11-1. Clause 3, approval of the administrative plan, City of Kingston Heritage Fund 2019 to 2020, and the appointment of councillors to participate in City of Kingston Heritage Fund jury review process in 2019. I will note that we need to appoint one councillor to the review committee for project grants and another councillor to the review committee for operating grants. So first I will ask for a volunteer for either committee, please. Councillor Doherty?
I'd be happy to join the operating grant committee.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have Councillor Doherty for the review committee for operating grants. Can I have a volunteer for the project grants, please? Councillor Kiley? Thank you very much. Okay. If there's no further discussion, then we would approve Clause 3 with Councillor Kiley on the review committee for project grants and Councillor Doherty on the review committee for operating grants. So we will call the vote, please. And that carries. Clause 4, electric vehicle charging stations implement fees for use. Deputy Mayor Neal.
Thank you. I understand that on the final day of the sitting of the legislature, enough conservatives had gone home that there was a private member's bill that passed that I understand, I haven't been able to read it, but I understand it makes this charging stations parking specifically for electric vehicles. And I brought this up at one other time. I'm just wondering if staff can look into that little known piece of legislation and see if we can indeed make it so that electric cars have exclusive parking rights at charging stations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chappelle.
Through you, Your Worship. Councillor Neal, I actually am quite aware of that legislation that's being proposed. It's being proposed by MPP Paul Calandra from Markham Oak Ridges. And the purpose of that is to ensure that electric vehicles only park in electric spots, but also that they are actually using that spot for charging. And then there would be similar fines that would be imposed as if you were parking in a disabled or handicapped parking spot. There are greater issues happening in the GTA where people are utilizing those spots because they're closer to mall entrances typically, similar to handicap spots. And so that is going forward, and you're absolutely correct. There will be a...
Thank you.
Thank you. I will point out that the item is actually with respect to the fees, not necessarily to this, but we'll allow it. It's tangential, but related. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the item that is before us? Okay, we'll call the vote then on Clause 4. Please vote. And that carries. Clause 5. There's no title for it. Oh, here it is. A request for temporary noise exemption, Richardson Stadium music concert. Councillor Stroud.
You can probably guess if my residents on Oak Ridge and Gibson had problems with amplified music in sporting events ending at 9:30, they're going to have a problem with a full-blown rock concert going till 11 p.m. It is a one-off. It's really difficult to get your head around what this actually means, but I would just draw council's attention to the fact that this has nothing to do with Queen's athletics or anything that Queen's does at all, that this is a private enterprise, that probably a very popular entertainment act for a segment of the population. But ask yourselves what percentage of the population is actually served by any one piece of entertainment. It's never universal. It's always a segment. So I do not understand why this cannot be in Market Square, like we had a very successful event, or the K-Rock Center. I understand this may be the preference of the applicant, but just think, although the report says infrequent, that's a very vague term. How many rock concerts are we going to see proposed? And is this the only one, or are we going to start doing this on a yearly basis as well? It's kind of coincidental it came on the same night, but anyways, I know what the small group of residents near the stadium are going to say about a rock concert going to 11, so I have to oppose this, but you're all free, of course, to make up your minds. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, will you take the chair?
I will indeed, and I recognize you.
Thank you. So I think in the context of the discussion that we have had thus far on noise exemption requests for Richardson Stadium, I think it is important to make a couple of comments with respect to this particular request. First off, I am very sympathetic to the concerns of residents in the area. And to Councillor Stroud's point, I understand there'd be concern about precedent. So are we moving to having rock concerts at Richardson Stadium? So I think what I will say, now obviously I can only speak for myself, but certainly in my view, this sort of request should be rare and unusual. And I can say that in this particular case, we are talking about a request that is very rare and very usual, or very unusual, that should attain a very high threshold. So we should not ordinarily grant something like this. In this particular case, we are talking about a band that has come out of Kingston that has hit the global radar and is currently touring worldwide and has an opportunity to have a special outdoor concert in the city of Kingston as a way to give back and show appreciation for their Kingston roots that they're very proud of. Now, I did speak with the band's manager. I do believe that given the context of what we're talking about, I think that I should say this, but we're talking about the Glorious Sons. So I'm just going to throw that out there. That is a very, very small category of bands that would fit into that category. So I think it's important to make a political statement to say, this is a very unusual event. This is not going to happen every year. Quite frankly, this might be the only time we see something like this in this term of council. I just don't see many other bands that are in that caliber of categorization. So having said that, I think that it would be a tremendous community event. I think it would be great for the community. I know that there is a charity component to this event. However, I do understand the concerns of the neighbors, and so I think that that's why we need to say that this is rare and unusual. That being said, I will ask council to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, and I return the chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I guess just to follow up on one question, which was why couldn't we hold it somewhere else? And I think my thought there is that a lot of the noise mitigation that's been done at Richardson Stadium kind of makes this an ideal spot. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's to do with the size and the venue needed as well, right? So this really is kind of the ideal location. Is that correct?
So I can also confirm that in discussions with the band's management that there was an attempt to look at other outdoor locations such as Fort Henry, but it was not available on that particular date. So that's why they're looking at Richardson Stadium.
Thank you.
Councillor Hill.
Well, I think I go back to some of the comments that you made about the fact that this is a community that historically has celebrated excellence, and obviously what happened in this community with the Tragically Hip was probably one of the most memorable events ever in my lifetime here in Kingston. I mean, we support the great contribution that our artists make. These kinds of things happen so rarely, that this kind of success happens so rarely. It's a chance for the community to really celebrate, and I do agree it likely will be a bit of an inconvenience for some of the neighbors on one occasion, but this is a time when the whole community comes behind a group of people who are doing some exceptional things, and I support this wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchison.
I feel I should say something since I voted against the last one. And the reasons, the mayor basically outlined them. It's a special occasion. It's a chance to give a homegrown act a push or a sport. And I don't think the community, I accept what Councillor Stroud says about his district. I know he knows his own district, and perhaps Councillor Doherty will see it the same way too, I don't know. But and I do know that, for instance, lots of people in Kingstown can hear the Memorial Center, the Agricultural Fair. They can hear the fireworks down on New Year's Eve. People support those things and never say anything. I've never received a complaint about either. And my way of thinking is because you realize it's of community benefit. And it only happens once a year, right? So you can hear it, you like it or you don't. And so I think that sort of applies here. It's a one-off, it's a special occasion, not likely to be repeated, and it ends at 11 p.m. People have a definite time. as I read this? Yep. Okay, so they know when it will stop. So I'll vote for it.
Okay, so we will call the vote on Clause 5. Please vote. And that carries by a vote of 10-2. Okay, moving on to report number 52 from Planning Committee.
Thank you. That was my wake-up call. I'm pleased to present report number 52 from the Planning Committee, duly moved and seconded. Thank you.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Neal, seconded by Councillor Osanek, that report number 52 from the Planning Committee be received and adopted, and I note that Councillor Kiley has stepped out of the room for the first item.
Okay, thank you. So we will first vote on the first clause, approval of an application for zoning bylaw amendment 330 Division Street. Yes, Councillor Hutchison?
Just want to say something. This property is across the road from my district on Division Street at York. And at planning, I voted for there and I'm going to vote for it now, but I'm hoping that planning will, the planning director will look at the letter we received. And there was a very heartfelt attempt to address the issues. There was a murder there, okay? And the person lost their brother. And there's a memorial there done by the community, and it's painted on the wall. There's also a number of things wrong with the property, which I think we will address eventually through the planning process, but I just want to make sure that planning gets this and it is looked into, and property standards too, okay? And it was a very sort of moving moment when the chair said, well, that's not really a land use planning issue. Really was hard to tell, what are we going to do with this? And in some sense, I think these people deserve to be heard, okay? And they've done actually a good thing out of a horrible thing. And I've stopped and talked to the artist on occasion, and I just feel I had to bring it up, okay? So I'll hang it on to someone. I don't see the director here, but someone can pass it on to them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on my list is Deputy Mayor Neal.
Thank you, and I appreciate the previous speaker. As the chair of planning, and it was approaching midnight, I kind of scolded somebody for bringing forward an issue that clearly isn't a land use planning or zoning issue. But the reality is that there have been, and this is in my district, there has been consistently property standards and bylaw issues at that property, and so they need to be addressed, not through planning, but through bylaw enforcement, and I look forward to that happening.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm going to echo what the other two councillors have said to a degree. I was sort of confounded, I guess, by the notion that at that planning committee we were going to approve, based on the mandate of the committee, we were going to approve this project, knowing that the building is a dilapidated building and needs to be addressed in terms of property standards and I think in terms of suitability for the inhabitants of it. And I don't know why, and I guess I'm asking this of staff, we would ever approve doubling the size of an already dilapidated, rundown building. So I guess I'm just, I know there's a process, and the process probably needs to be sort of seen to its logical conclusion, but that was a troubling decision at Planning Committee that night.
Yes, Mr. Newman.
Through you, Mayor Patterson, just for clarification, the application itself was to convert a ground level commercial unit into a residential unit with an addition off the back of the building. But I think the basis for the application was because of the fact that the commercial component has been unviable over the years and perhaps has led to some of the poorly kept nature of the property. We will certainly take it back and look into the property standards components, but the basis of the application was to introduce a residential use on the ground floor.
Okay, so with that, we will call the vote on Clause 1. Please vote. And that carries. Clause 2, approval of an application for zoning bylaw amendment 6675 Highway 15. We can do two at once. We'll wait for, would anyone like either number 2 and number 3 separated? Okay, so we'll do them together. So Clause 2 is approval of an application for zoning bylaw amendment 6675 Highway 15. Clause 3 is approval of an application for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment citywide. Please vote.
One more, please.
And that carries. Okay, on to report number 53 from the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee.
It's me again. I would like to present report number 53 from MAC. Again, duly moved and seconded. Thank you.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Neal, seconded by Councillor Hill, that report number 53 from the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee be received and adopted.
So there's just the one clause, Facility Accessibility Design Standards Update. We'll call the vote, please. And that carries. Report number 54 from the Administrative Policies Committee.
I rise to present Report 54, moved and seconded for Council's consideration. Administrative Policies.
Moved by Councillor Stroud, seconded by Councillor Chappell, that report number 54 from the Administrative Policies Committee be received and adopted.
So there's just the one clause, Queen's University West Campus Noise Mitigation Update. We will call the vote, please. And that carries. Okay, we have nothing from Committee of the Whole tonight. We have some information reports, so if you have any questions, just raise your hand as I read through them. Number 1, Drinking Water Source Protection Overview. Number 2, London's experience with ranked choice voting. Councillor Chappell.
Through you, Your Worship, London's experience ranked choice voting. I noted that it was reported and very positively in the local paper, the Week Standard, and there was actually greater information within that document that suggested the costs were greater than anticipated. And
question?
Yeah, how many in that report, how many, due to the ranked balloting process, how many ballots were deemed to be spoiled?
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you for that question. We don't have that information with us. We can do the research with the City of London, and we can provide it by memo to Council.
Okay, are there any other questions? Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I'm wondering about public education around ranked choice voting. It was mentioned in the report. When would that type of campaign start, approximately?
Mr. Clerk.
To you, Mr. Mayor, that is a great question. It has already started with respect to information that we've placed on the city's website in terms of FAQs and what ranked balloting is all about. But we're still about 3 years away from the deadline, so to speak. But between now and then, there will be a number of statutory open houses and public meetings. We'll have a robust public engagement and outreach strategy as well. At the same time, use all assets in terms of social media and print media to be able to get the message out. The important thing for this election, or at least to allow council to make the right decision, is to ensure that we provide a proper education component to both the community as well as prospective candidates that allow this council to make that decision on whether or not to adopt that bylaw in May of 2020.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Neal.
Thank you. And I had some time ago suggested that Kingston follow London's lead and just make it so for the last election. Frankly, I'm glad I didn't convince my colleagues at the time to take the plunge, because London did have some hiccups. Now, we had such an overwhelming support, 2/3 of our population said yes to ranked ballots. So I believe we should be committed to that. I had an opportunity, as others did at FCM, to talk to some of the companies that are that have the technology and have developed the technology, and it is because it isn't just a one-off in the City of London.
Is that a question?
Yes. Have the clerk's department had an opportunity to make approaches to that? And are you more confident in the technology 3 years from now than in the technology that London used? Thank you.
Through Mr. Mayor, another great question. We have already reached out to our vendor, the current vendor that we've had for the past elections, to ensure that the type of election that we want to run is doable, because the City of London did not do internet voting. So to me, that still is a concern, but our concerns have been allayed by our vendor that it can be done. We're also taking a look at, depending on how far down the road we go with respect to that, bringing in an independent auditor that will review that type of process to ensure that we are comfortable moving forward.
And it's my understanding that the most vendors now allow there to be a paper copy as well as the electronic.
Mr. Clerk?
Through Mr. Mayor, that is our decision, council and staff, with respect to how we want to run our election. We were confident, and we've seen the future. The future is with internet voting. So we're confident, based on the discussions that we've had with the vendors and some of the other research that we've done, that we are comfortable moving forward if that should be council's wish.
So Russia can't hack us, right? Thank you.
Councillor Sanik.
Thank you, Your Worship. I still have a concern about the delay in announcing the unofficial winners. And so when we look at the report, is London, did they use our same tabular voting system that Kingston used? Because they didn't even start counting the votes. It says the memory cards were uploaded by 11:30 p.m., but in Kingston, we already declared our unofficial results at 10:15. So did London give any indication as to what that gap was compared to us?
Through Mr. Mayor, that just happened to be the decision that the City of London made. They did not do remote vote hookups like we did. I expect that if we do the ranked ballot voting, that we will be able to provide the results similar or earlier than when we did at the last election.
Councillor Bone.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Knowing that the public doesn't always get to read the entirety of all these reports, as a lot of information comes out at once, could you just answer one question, and that would be, did it delay the results? Did it increase, I guess it's one question in 3 parts, did it increase the amount of the election cost by multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars? And did it change the outcome of any of the races? in the end?
Through Mr. Mayor, so we're just providing commentary on with respect to the City of London. So with respect to the additional cost, it was over $500,000. With respect to the results, they did not change. And I don't recall what your third point was.
So it delayed the results, correct? The official results?
Yes, the results, I don't want to say they were delayed because that's the choice that the City of London took, but the results in the City of London were done the next day. We did ours 10:15 on a voting day.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, we will continue. So information report number 3, 2018 Development Charges Reserve Fund Statement and 2018 Impost Fee Reserve Fund Statement. Number 4, tender and contract awards subject to the established criteria for delegation of authority for the month of April 2019. Number 5, Addictions and Mental Health Services, update on changes. Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Through you, I have one more question about this that I couldn't ask the briefing or the delegation given the limitation on questions, and it's about the new landlords that the organization is seeking out. Is it that those people who may take over those houses would also provide the supports that are currently being provided by AMHS? Because that's kind of how I was reading it in the report, but I wasn't sure if that is what was said tonight.
Ms. Nordegraff?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is our understanding as a city service manager that AMHS is exploring options. We are not aware of any existing relationships that they have with potential landlords that they are working with. As identified in the reports, information reports, we are having conversations with AMHS as part of our role as a service manager around their properties.
And when we have more clarity on that, will we be able to have more information?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as also identified in the information report, we are also at this point working through our midpoint review with the 10-year housing and homelessness plan. And one of the priorities of that plan is the focus on supportive and transitional housing. So as part of that, we're also obviously in conversation with many partners, including AMHS. And obviously their proposed changes will be reviewed through that process.
Thank you. That's good.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to number 6, 2019 Ontario Budget Overview. Okay, we have no information reports from members of council. Miscellaneous business. Number 1, that the following councillors have put their names forth to fulfill the appointment of deputy.
Sorry, I had a question.
Oh, Councillor Hutchison?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed your hand. You had a question about?
About number 6.
Oh, number 6. Okay, so that was back to information report 2019 Ontario Budget Overview. Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
Okay. That wasn't worth listening to, what I was saying there. On the housing and homelessness bit, I just want to make sure I understood the federal step-down funding. And so I just had a couple of questions about that. That is, it says the city will receive $114,000 in 2019, $271,000 to 2020, and $715,000 2021. I presume that's from the province?
Acting CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Okay. So now, this next statement sort of confounded me. I wasn't quite sure what the meaning was here. It then goes on to say, this is not an issue as the city currently spends $11 million in the municipal funds each year on social housing. What was trying to be imparted there? Tells us about the money we will receive, then says this is not an issue. I would have thought it was a good thing because it's replacing federal money that's disappearing, as the city currently spends $11 million of municipal funds each year on social housing. I didn't understand what was being said there. $509, I believe. Yeah.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so my understanding is it's not an issue because we currently fund more than what would be the matching funding. So it won't impact us because we are actually funding at a higher level.
So does that mean we've allocated budget-wise more just than we actually need in a particular year?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. No, this means this is the current allocation, what we had planned to require for the year when we prepared the 2019 budget.
But we'll still take the money, right? Okay. She nodded. It's okay. So the next, the replacement for the investment in affordable housing is the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative. There's an oddity in here because it's used mainly for capital projects and to expend rent supplement program. So there's the capital and then there's an operating expenditure. And it mentions in the next paragraph as well that we don't have the guidelines. We're going to use some of the money to help us do the 90 new affordable housing units at 1316 Princess. What I don't understand is that capital funding is one thing, but rent supplement is something that's ongoing. So I'm just wondering what our understanding is about how we're going to use this money.
Acting CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So typically with these programs, and as we've seen in the past, is that the province gives us a couple of options on how we can spend the money. Capital funding is always part of the options that we usually have, but sometimes they do provide us with the option to use the money for rent supplements as well. So depending on the provincial government and depending on the options, we usually report back to council with a recommendation on how we think the city should spend the money. In this case, we did assume when we did the strategic planning that we would be looking at these funds to help finance those 90 units at 1316 Princess Street, but we still need to bring back a report to council with that exact recommendation, and I believe that's coming this summer, so either July or August. This report will be coming back to you. It will have a clear recommendation in terms of where the dollars are coming from, as well as a number of units, but that is really what we were targeting in the strategic planning exercise.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you. Through you, Your Chair. Looking at the report, it indicated that we're currently at risk about $1 million shy with this fiscal with cutbacks from the province. Hearing the event that we had in the electoral process in London where it cost $500,000, would it not make sense to not have additional expenditures such as that going forward in order to compensate perhaps other cutbacks from the province?
I'm not sure if that's really a question related to the 6 information report. I mean, I'll give you credit for trying, Councillor Chappelle. I think that's a bit of a stretch. Are there any other questions related to this information report? Okay, so seeing none, we'll continue on. So we were at miscellaneous business. So number 1, that the following councillors have put their names forth to fill the appointment of deputy mayor for 2-month increments for the months of August 2019 to May 2020. Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Neal, Councillor Osterhoff, and Councillor Stroud. So I will turn it over to clerk to do the draw of the names, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before we start with the draw, are there any other members of council who would like to put their name forward at this time?
Councillor Kiley, thank you. Anybody else?
Councillor Kiley, you're for August and September 2019. Congratulations. What's that? Yeah, I couldn't see it.
Yeah, are we going to have a ranked ballot for deputy mayor choices?
Councillor Stroud, you're penciled in for October and November. Councillor Oosterhoff, you're December and January. Huh? Councillor Chappelle, you're in for February and March. And Councillor Neal, you're in for April and May. So you'll have a couple weeks to trade off if you decide that you're unable to fulfill those particular months, and we'll confirm the appointments in July. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to number 2, that as requested by Francisco Carbett for Forever. Council designate the event Crash Course being held Friday night, July 19th, 2019 at Open Studios located at 39 Montreal Street, Kingston, as an event of municipal significance to which special occasion permits may be issued by the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Hutchison? Or do you have
I'd like to move it if you like, but I have no idea what this is. What am I voting for?
Mr. Clerk, do we have any background, Madam Deputy Clerk? Yes.
Through you, Mayor Patterson, under the Ontario Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, in order for an individual or a group who is requesting to have a liquor license where they'll be open to the public, they need to have the approval of the local council to designate it as an event of municipal significance.
So is that what you're asking? You're just asking what the event is?
No, but that was fine, but
yeah.
I'm asking what is for
Yeah, so the question is what the event
and what
is.
is Crash Course, or at least something.
Sorry, I misunderstood the question. Through you, Mayor Patterson, it is an event displaying the individual's artwork.
Okay, so Councillor Hutchison, you're okay to move that, seconded by Councillor Oosterhoff. Thank you. Okay, we'll call the vote. And that carries. Number 3, that is requested by Bronek Korzinski Peace Quest. City Council proclaimed September 21st, 2019 as Peace Day in the City of Kingston. Moved by Deputy Mayor Neal, seconded by Councillor Osanek. Please vote. And that carries. And number 4, that is requested by Stephanie Landers, Ontario Water Power Association Organization. City Council proclaimed June 20th, 2019 as Water Power Day in the City of Kingston. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Hill, seconded by Deputy Mayor Neal. Thank you. Please vote. And that carries. Mr. Clerk, can I see you for a moment? Okay, so on to new motions. Number 1, moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Kiley. Whereas Canada's national banks, global insurance companies, and the world's scientists are urging swift and significant action on climate change, with a 50% reduction needed by 2030 to avoid catastrophic economic, social, and environmental damage. And whereas the current Kingston City Council declared a climate emergency, and such an emergency calls for immediate response to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and whereas the current Kingston City Council committed to demonstrated leadership on climate action through strategic planning, including reducing emissions drastically and equally across the corporation and community. And whereas the current Kingston City Council has to date endorsed climate initiatives that will see emissions reduced in 2021, 2022, mainly through corporate efforts like electrifying the city's fleet, retrofitting buildings, and a new climate change management strategy. And whereas Kingston City Council has the ability to create a working group to bring together corporate and community partners to find immediate and inexpensive GHG emission reduction strategies in the community, especially in the industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors. And whereas the IC&I sector accounts for a significant portion of emissions in Kingston, And whereas such a working group is within the scope of council's approval powers and has been done before, and whereas the motions establishing such a working group previously approved by council have included their mandate, membership, leadership, and reporting structures, and whereas the mandate of this proposed working group is intended to be completed by early fall 2019, therefore time is of the essence, therefore be it resolved that council establish the working group on climate action, and that the mandate of this working group be to promote, engage, inform, and challenge community organizations, institutions, and businesses to reduce GHG emissions in the IC&I sector as soon as possible at no to little cost, and that the membership of the working group include 2 co-chairs, Councillor Blank and Councillor Blank, as volunteered and approved by council, and the following organizations be invited to appoint a representative from SLC, RMC, Queens, Keefe, CRCA, the Chamber of Commerce, Switch, KFLNA Public Health, Sustainable Kingston, Kingston Climate Hub, 350 Kingston, and the school boards. And the working group meet at the discretion of the chairs, consult with Keefe, and report to council no later than October 31st, 2019, with a list of actions for potential implementation by community partners, businesses, and corporation to reduce GHG emissions in an immediate and inexpensive manner. Councillor Stanek, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I want to thank Council for providing all the feedback that they did 2 weeks ago. The next day after Council, Councillor Kiley, Councillor Doherty, and we met with staff to try to rework the wording since I withdrew it, and now we're back tonight. So this is take 2. So what has changed from 2 weeks ago is that now we have removed the pre-appointed co-chairs. You can see the names are blank, so tonight we can vote on who wants to fill those to be the 2 members of council on this working group. We also have the focus now of the ICI sector, so that's institutional, industrial, the commercial sector, because we know from our studies that over 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions in Kingston are produced from the ICI sector. We also, too, are still fighting the clock, right? So if we did go through nominations committee to have members of the public at large, it was going to be really tight in bringing this back to City Council with, the appointment of those members of large for the July meeting. And then we'd be pushed into August. So focusing on the ICI sector can help us, still get this list of quick wins by Q3, no, that'd be Q4, right? By October of in the fall of this year, so we can start working on that right away. What else has changed is that so we're going to be writing to these to the ICI sector, asking them to inviting them to appoint a representative. So they might not want to appoint a representative. It's going to be left up to them if they want to appoint a representative, but we do know that we do have already some representatives from those groups that we've mentioned. We've added the CRCA, and about getting public input, Kingston Climate Hub, 350 Kingston, they are based of members of the public, as is Switch and Sustainable Kingston. And you can see we also added that we're going to be consulting with Keefe. Keefe had a meeting last night, and they know that this is on the agenda for tonight. And it's my understanding that they're going to have a meeting, if this passes tonight, very quickly to try to appoint a member of Keefe to this working group. And the results, like the actions, the implementation plan, list of actions will be coming through to Keefe in the fall. So hopefully we've incorporated that feedback to Council's Laking from 2 weeks ago. And I think that's all I have to say. But the biggest thing is information sharing, right? We're bringing the ICI sector together, having information sharing. Do we right now know what RMC is doing, what Queens is doing, what St. Lawrence College is doing? I don't, right? And this will bring it all together. And for some quick wins, like today was a really hot day. If we start to have consecutive hot days again, air conditioners are going to have to be put on at the institutions, at the places of work. And maybe one quick win could be, well, let's try to not set the air conditioner below 26 degrees. What do you think? Oh, we tried that. Someone might say, oh, we tried that last year. That was still too hot. Maybe we should aim for 25 degrees. It's all information sharing, right? Or to use recycling paper. We've always heard, if you do like an internet Google, you'll hear that sometimes these large institutions that are sending out lots and lots of letters can't use recycled paper because it's dirty and it starts to jam up the photocopiers. Is that really true? Maybe one brand of recycled photocopier is better than another. Maybe RMC's had better luck than what Queens has had using recycled paper. Or maybe you can't go 100% recycled paper. You can only go 30% recycled paper. So this is bringing all the groups together, looking for those low-cost initiatives. Recycled paper is only a little bit more expensive than using, like virgin forest paper, and so maybe there are, those are the quick wins I'm hoping to see by those list of actions that are low cost and easy, hopefully, to implement. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Next on my list is Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, just as a little preamble here. So I think one of the key things that was mentioned is that the ICI sector is responsible for over 50% of emissions. And in my mind, what I kind of see this as really trying to do is to create that conversation. But we already know the city is doing so much on this front, but we can only really be successful in this endeavor if we're partners in it. And as such, in conjunction with Councillor Stroud, I have an amendment which will hopefully address that and lead to joint leadership with this working group. So the clerks already have it, but I can read it out unless you want to read it out, Your Worship.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend. It's been moved by Councillor Bowman, seconded by Councillor Stroud. So paragraph 12. Okay, so this is to amend paragraph 12.
Yes.
And effectively, so it's naming, is there any difference in the list of these groups versus?
The only difference is essentially in the bottom portion where you'll see that it includes 2 co-chairs, which was obviously already stated in the previous one, but with one co-chair being one of the 2 appointed members of council and one co-chair being a representative from the ICI sector. So it's a shared leadership.
Okay. So is everyone clear on what that motion to amend reflects? Councillor Bowman, you have the floor.
So essentially this was to try to address some of the fact that we couldn't get necessarily the public representation without delaying this significantly. So the idea here is that this truly needs to be a partnership. And as such, by inviting these groups to the table, I also think it's important that they actually have a leadership role at that table. And the overall success of this will be everybody around the table feeling that they've had something to offer, but also being part of leading this endeavor. So I think that this is key, that this is, it's not really to take away anything, it's more to add it so that everybody feels like they have an equal share in this, because we all shoulder this responsibility, and the ICI sector shoulders probably even a little bit more than 50% of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the amendment only? So really that is speaking to changing it from the council representatives being the co-chairs to having one co-chair from council and one from the ICI sector. Deputy Mayor Neal.
Thank you. I had an opportunity to speak to the mover before council, and I support the intent of this. If you look at that list with maybe only 3 exceptions, everybody on that list, even those that wear multiple hats, are part of the ICI sector. And I would feel more comfortable, and I don't know if this is a friendly amendment, to just say a non-elected, one of the co-chairs shall be a non-elected official. And that gives everybody an opportunity. And like I say, I think there's only 3 on that list or 4, I guess, I see a 4th one, that wouldn't be part of the ICI. So.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, can I see you for a moment? Okay. So Councillor Neal, you wish to make an amendment that would essentially allow the second co-chair to be drawn from any organization on this list. Is that correct?
From any non-elected appointee.
So having consulted with the clerk, the most efficient way you would do that is you would amend the last paragraph of the amendment to simply delete in the second line, and one co-chair being a representative from the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector, ICI. So in other words, what it would read is that the membership of the working group include 2 co-chairs, with one co-chair being one of the 2 appointed members of council. Thereby, by extension, the other member of council would be from the remaining group.
That works for me.
Okay, so there's a motion then to amend the amendment. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Osanek. Deputy Mayor Neal, is there anything else you wish to speak to the motion to amend the amendment?
No, I just, I know that our refocusing of this, the intent of this motion was to emphasize the ICI, and I'll talk when we get to the main motion about this a little bit, but I think there's an opportunity to go beyond just addressing ICI within this. And this gives a certain amount of autonomy to the committee itself to choose who they wish to be the co-chair, the second co-chair. So.
Okay, so we are on the amendment to the amendment right now. So that means only speaking to whether or not to delete that one piece about the second co-chair being a representative from the ICI sector. Okay, so Councillor Chappelle.
Through you, Your Worship, I just have a question on process. I actually had an amendment that I wish to bring for this amendment. Do I now wait for this first amendment to go through?
Yes.
Then I'll have my speaking at that time.
That's right. That's right. Anybody else who wishes to speak to this amendment? That's the amendment to the amendment that is on the floor right now. Councillor Bohm and then Councillor Straub.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I guess I understand where Councillor Neal's coming from with this, is just trying to open it up. I guess in my mind this kind of almost sort of undoes what the intent was, which was the ICI sector being responsible for such a large portion of emissions. It was to try to give them a leadership role at this committee to create buy-in after with the recommendations that would come out of this committee. So I guess in my mind, if you open it up to the 3 or 4 other ones, which I guess you could say have something to say, but not necessarily the ability directly to impact their emissions as the ICI sector would, you're almost sort of taking that away. So in my mind, I think it's important that the co-chair actually is from the ICI sector to create the buy-in from the ICI sector with what actually comes out of this working group. So with that in mind, I think taking that out really hampers that. So I can't support that because it kind of really changes the intent in the grand scheme of things. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stroud.
Yeah, I think before we vote on this amendment again, we need to know what we're voting on. So let's just, you see there's a list of membership. So there's going to be 2 councillors and voluntary members from up to 15 invited organizations. And you see the list there. And most of those are from industrial, commercial, or institutional. So the first one, second one, third one, not Keefe. CRCA is not ICI. Chamber of Commerce is yes, it's commercial. Switch is not. Public Health is it's institutional. Sustainable Kingston is not. Climate Hub is not. 350 Kingston is not. The rest of the school boards are institutional. So without the amendment, the chair would be from one of those 10 ICI groups that have been invited. And the point about the buy-in is absolutely crucial. Because if you get the second chair from a environmental advocacy group, for example, they do not have any particular, that we know of, association with the large players that have been invited to the table, and therefore whatever comes out of the discussions may not compel anyone to act. So it might be nice sounding stuff that just doesn't have an effect. So I think that although the amendment is very democratic, just having the working group choose second co-chair from its membership, which makes perfect sense, I think we need to keep the original intent intact, which is why I seconded it, and I will be voting against the amendment to the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kiley.
I'll yield my time for now. It's been said well. I won't support the amendment for the fact that it doesn't hit the intent of the amendment to the motion, which has the intent of bringing IC and I together, so I won't be in favor of it.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchison.
My understanding of this working group, on climate action is that the public will be welcome to go to these meetings and contribute, regardless of who the chairs are. So I agree with Councillor Bowman and Councillor Stroud, even though I understand where Councillor Neil is coming from. Insofar as the public will be welcome to be there and have their piece, then I'm fine with the amendment as it is.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Neil, it's your amendment. Is there anything else you wish to say?
No, I've said it all, I think.
Okay, so we will call then the vote on the amendment to the amendment. Is everyone clear on what we're voting for? Okay, so we'll call the vote. Who was the seconder on that? Was Councillor Osanek? Yeah. Please vote. And that loses by a vote of 3-9. So we're now back to the amendment. Deputy Mayor Neil, you still have the floor. If there's anything else you wish to say?
Thank you. Yes, I attended Keefe, as Councillor Doherty did yesterday, and they very enthusiastically embraced this idea. There was some discussion at the meeting about whether the focus was going to be solely or primarily on the ICI, or whether this working group could go beyond that. And from what I'm hearing, it sounds like it's primarily ICI. Was that the intent of the mover and the seconder?
Point of order. We're discussing the amendment, which is the difference in wording between that includes the ICI as being the chair.
True, but I think you could argue that because we're talking about making one of the ICI representatives the chair, that the question is in order. The heads were nodding, by the way.
Thank you.
So that's your answer. Yeah. Okay. Next on my list is Councillor Kiley.
I'm sorry. Could
I'm sorry.
The mover or seconder just confirm that the focus will be primarily on the ICI?
Councillor Osanek.
While the focus would be on the ICI sector, what their list of actions, that they bring, because they would be low cost and, quick wins, so easy to implement, quick to implement. Definitely someone at home could also hopefully try to implement those same things. So those two examples I used of just air conditioning or, the recycled paper. Everybody has home printers. A lot of people have air conditioning, so I'm hoping that there would also be the draw for residents too.
Okay, next on my list is Councillor Kiley.
I just wanted to comment, thank you, Mayor Patterson, through you, that I think this amendment is in the spirit of the first motion, given the whereas clauses that single out IC&I because of the amount of emissions. That was said well by Councillor Boehm earlier, so I will support this.
Thank you. Councillor Chappelle.
Through your worship, noting that it's Indigenous Peoples Month, I look at the list and I notice that there is no representation from the Indigenous community on this list, and I was wondering if that was just an oversight by the mover, or if this is something that you would like to see as an amendment to have representation on this committee.
Councillor Osanek.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Do you have a group in mind to add there? I don't know of a group Indigenous belonging to the ICI sector to add to the list.
No, we do have representation of the Indigenous community here in Kingston. We pay respect to them at every one of our council meetings. Surely there's someone in the community that would be interested in participating in the caretaking of Turtle Planet. What is it? Turtle Island. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is that it? Okay. I'm not trying to push one of the, I'm not trying to cut anybody off either. So, council. Okay, well, okay. So we have a motion to amend, but it needs to be in writing. So, or at least tell me what it is that...
This is an actual point of order. That's an amendment to the original motion, not an amendment to the amendment.
That is true. So what we will do is when we get to the main motion, if someone wishes to amend it at that point, well, Mr. Clerk, can I see your for a moment? In actual fact, it is, given that the list of organizations is included in the amendment, it is in order. So it can actually be done now. So Councillor Chappelle, if you have a motion to amend the amendment, we will entertain it now. Maybe you can share the wording just so that we can get the discussion going.
Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Bohm, that an Indigenous people's representative be added to the list of participants in the working committee.
Okay, is there any discussion then on the motion to amend the amendment? I think everyone's clear what that is, even as Councillor Chappelle is writing it out. So if you can just read it out for us. I don't think that we need to necessarily read it on the screen, but just...
Okay, the motion is to amend the membership to add an Indigenous member to the working group.
Okay. Councillor Stroud?
So I'd like to draw Council's attention to the wording of the amendment. It says that the following organizations be invited to appoint a representative. And it's a list of organizations. The amendment, as proposed, does not mention an organization. So who, if passed, who would be doing the asking and who would we be asking is my question to staff.
So I'm not sure that that's a question for staff. This is a council motion.
Okay, my question is to the clerk. If this amendment passes, what happens if the whole thing passes, and how is that Indigenous member identified and approached?
Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is an interesting question. After all, this is a motion from council. It does not have any staff support with respect to this working group. So there are a number of options, two options that come to mind. The clerk's department could reach out to these organizations and ask them to submit a name, and then we would let the council and the community know, or one of the co-chairs could reach out to these organizations and secure those names. We're more than prepared to do the work if council's okay with that.
Okay, so I'm going to ask that council not support the amendment because it's not specific enough to be of any use. It does not name any Indigenous organization, and therefore whoever's in charge of looking for that member is going to be it'll be completely arbitrary who they approach. The remainder of the list are all specific organizations that have contact numbers that are available, very easy to approach. This is like, you know, if you put a member of the Italian community, it wouldn't be any more useful. So I just think it's poorly thought out and don't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the amendment to the amendment? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. So the committee, the working group, the intention with this is to come up with a report to council by October 31st. The staff will be updating and combining the corporate climate action plan and the community action plan into a climate change management strategy, and that will include significant public and stakeholder engagement. It will be much larger than this. The reason that these organizations were chosen is to just come up with something now. We declared a climate emergency, which means we should be acting and doing some things now, which I do recognize the city is doing things now, but we should start the conversations and start to find some action items. That's what it is about. It's not about leaving anybody out. There's no intentions of leaving anyone out at all in this conversation, because we also know that the conversations will be going much broader and there will be significant public engagement in the months to come. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, will you take the chair?
I will, and I recognize you.
I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Stroud's comment on this. While I appreciate the intent of what's trying to be done here, at this rate, we're going to be here all night. And ultimately, we're in danger of deferring this motion yet again to our next meeting. So unless that's what council wants, I would suggest that we focus on getting the working group established. There's lots of flexibility once that's in place to then actually deal with invitations and ensure that certain groups attend, as these meetings would be open to the public. So for that reason, I will encourage council not to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, and I return the chair.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the amendment, to the amendment? Okay. We will call the vote. And that loses by a vote of 4-8. So we are back to the original amendment. Councillor Chappelle, you still have the floor if there's anything else that you wanted to add. You still have the floor. I'm just checking if there's anything else you want to say to the amendment.
No, that is fine. Thank you.
Okay. Next on my list is Councillor Stroud.
Thank you. To the amendment. Most of what I have to say about it has to do with its chance of success. And so, like we've already agreed, I think several of us have mentioned this, the ICI sector is the target for maybe the greatest upside to the work of the working group as proposed. And if there is no buy-in from the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector in this process, you got to wonder what the result's going to be in any tangible way. So therefore, absolutely the priority and the push has to be to elevate the reality and concerns of that sector. Why, understanding why they do the things they do, and what can they identify if asked that is doable. The situation when you say, okay, before we come up with next steps, we need to agree on what's the problem. The first step is admitting you have the problem. So just because we've declared a climate emergency doesn't mean the ICI sector is ready to act on it, right? So that buy-in is actually the next step. And if we don't get it, this goes nowhere. So that's why when Councillor Bowman approached me, I immediately saw it was a further improvement to the motion, which I thought was already improved from last time. So this gets it towards the point where it has a chance of succeeding. And I think without that being spelled out in the motion, we risk creating another working group that does a lot of information gathering and doesn't come up with any tangible solutions. So I'm hoping that the amendment passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ostroff.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I would like to recommend an amendment moved by Councillor Ostroff, seconded by Councillor Osanek, that the KCA, Kingston Construction Association, be invited to appoint a representative to be included in the list of organizations to the working group.
Okay. We have a motion to amend the amendment that is on the floor. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the amendment? Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Through you, I'm concerned if we start to have a laundry list of organizations, we'll just keep amending and 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 keep amending. And when we do that, we keep waiting to try this out. That's what we're trying to do, is just bring people together to talk, to look for solutions for the climate emergency that we all agreed to unanimously. And while I recognize that the construction sector plays a very large part of this conversation, you could say technically it doesn't fit under IC&I, which is the focus of this group for this time. If it's clear, and I think it will be actually, after this group reports back, that more needs to be done, especially as it pertains to residential, construction, other areas that this doesn't directly address, then we'll find ways to do that. So I'd respectfully say, let's not go with that emotion, only because it moves us away from action, which we've been waiting too long already. And let's look for other ways to address other areas that need climate action as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you. I actually support it because that sector does generate a lot of greenhouse gases, and I thought it's a great idea, in fact. And I do see it as part of the ICI, so respectfully, I really support that, and I thought it's a great idea, actually. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Osanek.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support it because I think this is the last amendment. Thank you.
I'm going to hold council to this. Okay, last amendment. Okay, Councillor Bohm.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I will be supporting this, and one of the reasons is it brings a view that I didn't really think about initially, which was the practical side of things, which you can only sometimes get from people who do the job every day. And this brings it down to about as grassroots as you can get, because you're starting to talk about how people build their homes, and how people build their homes is going to be basically what sustains us going forward. It's about that sustainable construction, sustainable effort right from the grassroots up. So I do understand the kind of mission creep, that's sort of the fear that's happening here, but again, I believe it's the last amendment, so I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
I'm going to support it, but I have such reservations about this because we have, I'm looking at Schedule B2 advisory committees, the Kingston Environmental Advisory Forum. You know, we're establishing committees on the run whose efforts are going to be effectively duplicating the work that, or duplicating the work of a committee that we could have enhanced in terms of what their role was. All of those sectors, or almost all the sectors, with the exceptions of the amendments tonight, are included in that group, and their job is to advise on council's strategic priorities, be a catalyst and conduit for public engagement and awareness, and identify and advise council on emerging issues and future priorities. We could have assigned this work to Keith a long time ago, let Keith set the priorities for including some of these different groups in the community. Right now, we're creating a committee that is duplicating its efforts, and I'm going to support it because I don't want the community to think that, we're not taking the action that we need to take on our climate emergency declaration, but I don't understand why we're duplicating this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the amendment? Councillor Stroud.
In contrast to the previous amendment, I actually like this one. It's an identifiable organization. It brings in the frontline construction industry. And here's my medical analogy. So if there was a hospital committee that had a bunch of doctors on it, talking about how to improve patient workflow or whatever, and someone thought at the last minute, hey, maybe we should ask the nurses if they want to sit on this committee, I would say brilliant idea. So that's the kind of thinking that Councillor Oosterhoff has brought forward here. It's shockingly simple, and I think it really does improve the list of invitees and hopefully get us a lot more practical solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anybody else that wishes? Oh yes, Councillor Hutchison.
I just want to say that I will support this because I think it is an oversight and it does bring a different point of view quite possibly to the table if they're really so kind as to take part. I also don't think that what's going on here duplicates what Keefe does. In my experience, it takes Keefe a long time to do this. And if you want something, a strategy or tactics to work, you've got to have external champions and internal champions, and this is an attempt to bring them together. And that's why I would support the whole thing, including this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we're going to call the vote on the very last amendment to the amendment. Deal? Okay. Please vote. And that carries by a vote of 11-1. Okay, so now we are back to the amendment. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the amendment to the motion? Okay, we will then call the vote on the amendment.
Just before I call the vote, I just want to point out that it's the amendment as amended.
Thank you. The amendment as amended. Please vote. And that carries by a vote of 10-2. So we are now back to the main motion as amended. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak right now? I have had Councillor Osanik has spoken to it and Councillor Bone. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the main motion? Yes, next on my list is Deputy Mayor Neal.
Thank you. I want to say that I didn't vote on the last amendment, but I support the intent of this, although I share some of Councillor Hill's reservations. We have Keefe, which was established almost 2 decades ago with terms of reference that have quite a bit of overlap with this motion. But some of our discussion at yesterday's Keefe meeting, and Councillor Doherty sits on that committee with me, I think was very beneficial. They totally embraced and want to support this initiative. I think, and I hope I'm dead wrong, but I think October 31st, our next Halloween, as the deadline for completing a report is very, very ambitious. And we need some organization, and it could be staff, but an organization that can continue the process that gets established by this working group. And having a member of Keefe on this committee, which wasn't the case initially, and a commitment to consider for Keefe's August meeting a kind of progress report with what this committee has done gives an established committee of council an opportunity to continue the process that hopefully will be successfully started with this motion. So I'm looking forward to that happening. I have a couple of questions. Like all working groups, it's my understanding that there won't be staff support on this. That means no clerks, so the committee will keep their own minutes and is that accurate?
Mr. Clerk, through Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
Okay. So I'm
sorry, Acting CEO Hurdle.
Thank you.
Thank you, and through Mr. Mayor. So there will not officially be a clerk, so it won't be a formal committee meeting like the committee structures, but all working groups that we have actually have staff involvement and support. So if we pick, for example, Bell Park Working Group, there are recreation staff that are working with the working group, although there's not technically a formal committee clerk because it's not a committee. So in this case, we would have someone from the environmental division that would be assigned to support this working group.
Thank you. Fair comment. I'm also hopeful that there'll be an opportunity either through an information report and given the timeline, the third Monday in August is when Keith meets. So if there's an opportunity for an information report for Keith or to come through council, that would be, I think, helpful in this process. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Chappelle?
Through your worship, I note that this motion has changed from the previously withdrawn motion and that was focused on actions in the greater community and more now onto the institutional sector in an effort to reduce GHG emissions. But in doing so, I think if you're going to champion the climate emergency, you must demonstrate you know what's going on in the community to begin with. And we spoke about Keith several times now. And I look back, that Keith was created in 2000 by a volunteer committee of council with a mandate to identify environmental issues and priorities in Kingston and to assist the city in preparation of an environmental strategy. Members of Keith were mandated to have 3 members of council, 2 from Queens, 1 from RMC, 1 from St. Lawrence College, the Cataraqui Conservation Authority, as well as the health unit. So many of those people are represented there. It's very much a duplication of efforts. I look at what we're currently doing. We have the Green Economy Program. We have Sustainable Kingston. We have St. Lawrence College's Footprint Program. We have RMC through Dr. Valchopoulos. I'll apologize in advance. Determining green buildings, and a lot of work on that. We have Queens with creating a center for carbon reduction with the Capit project. And these are all relatively recent. So it would lend to me to suggest that by coming up with a motion like this to go after the ICI sectors, we're saying to them, you know, we met a decade ago and you've gone off and done all sorts of great things, but we don't acknowledge what you've done. We want to have some quick hits on how to improve things. So I really think this motion suggests that we haven't really appreciated the efforts that have been completed by our city staff, our community at large, our citizens, our schools that teach our kids. I mean, I get all kinds of information from the school from my children, and it doesn't address the fact that the ICI partners have done an incredible job already to date. So I would like to know from the mover of the motion what unique value added this new committee, which seems to have a very similar mandate to Keith, will benefit our community, and what specific measurable goals you wish you visualize, and what do you expect to achieve?
So, so the mover gets a chance to speak last. So I'm actually going to defer that. So I think it's better, given those type of questions, you basically have raised some concerns. It's now up to the mover then to be able to address those concerns, rather than doing a Q&A right now. If it's just straight information, then I think that that's different. So Okay, anybody else to the main motion? All right, next time on this is Councillor, yes, before we do that, it is 10:43. Can I have a motion to extend the meeting, please? To finish the agenda? Moved by Deputy Mayor Neal, seconded by Councillor Bon. Please vote. And that carries by a vote of 11-1. Next on my list is Councillor Stroud.
So the previous speaker made reference, and others have as well, to duplication and so on. And there's two ways you can look at that. You can look at it as waste of time, or you can look at it as either a new take on an old idea that may have a chance of becoming trendy, or you may also look at it as instilling a little bit of friendly competition amongst two different groups that are set up differently. And I actually think, having sat on Keefe myself for a couple of years, that a little bit of friendly competition may be a good thing. We hear from Councillor Neal that they actually loved the idea because they probably feel like sharing ideas with a group with a similar mandate actually might improve their own dialogue. So if they felt like it was kind of competition that might put them out of business, they might not have been, endorsing it so wholeheartedly at the meeting last night. So I think that itself shows that it's actually the latter. It's the friendly competition that it sets up that would light a fire under both Keefe and the new group to produce something of value. And can you really have too much conversation about solutions about such a difficult problem? Probably not. I suspect that ultimately what this entire endeavor will show is that more people in the community at large, not just the ICI sector, but more citizens are engaging on the topic in ways that they can relate to through their jobs and through their home lives and through their choices. And that is ultimately the upside of this whole thing. And the reason why I went from last time being very, very skeptical to being more optimistic this time. I think we've gotten it just far enough that it has a chance of at least stimulating the conversation. The only question that remains is about reporting structure. So, reporting structure. So this is a working group of council with volunteers, couple of council appointees, a great list of organizations to approach. We'll get some volunteers for sure. But what happens with those minutes, those discussions, when they come to the point where they're ready to tell us what they've got? I guess it comes back to us here at council. We are still going to have to do the work of making the council motions to put any of this stuff into motion. Anything at all. So whatever comes out of this, it's not the end result. The end result comes back to us. And that brings me to my final point. If there are quick wins to be made in the community or in the ICI sector, we could potentially make those motions right now. We wouldn't have to wait even till October. So if anything comes up between now and the end of this group's mandate, if this passes, there's nothing preventing us from acting on it at any time as we ought to, because that's what the people have done. They put us here to make these decisions. It's actually on us. It's on us to come up with motions that perform climate action. It's on us. It's not on this group. This group is to help start the conversation, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to come up with the motions. So I hope everybody will be paying attention to what they're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. So there's no one solution to address climate change. All of Council received an email from a resident yesterday, and I'd just like to quote just one line out of it. Climate change has no one-step solution. It is a puzzle that has many parts. Making them all fit and finding the pieces is the challenge. And that is what this working group is all about, is just another piece of the puzzle, trying to add to all of the initiatives. There's no, Keefe was very supportive, I believe, and Sustainable Kingston is going to be part of the group. So it's not climate change is not about competing. We all need to get on board. We all need to try to find actions. The ICI sector, the community, everyone. So this is just yet another strategy to try to get some actions. And I'm very confident that this group will present to council some really great initiatives.
Thank you. Next on my list is Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think council knows I've been championing the natural step as a climate change management strategy. I just want to take a moment to point out how this initiative fits in with that and why. Originally, I thought it was too vague the last time, but it's been sharpened up considerably, especially as amended. And we are bringing together, one of the reasons why this is necessary is we are bringing these groups together. In the end, we want to bring businesses and the community together as a whole, because the problem is that big and that complex. And so the first thing is that, of course, we need a baseline strategy, and how better to start that. I see this motion as a precursor to starting that climate change management strategy, because these are the people that are looking at the baseline. And it's going to be a job to put one together. And the other part of it is that we are going to have to figure out steps that we will do between the baseline study and the vision, which we still have to come up with, about what is sustainability in our case and what does it involve. And those steps are being partly done there. But the problem is we don't have a coherent, holistic approach. And I think everybody knows that's a huge job. And I understand that in the very soon future, staff are actually working on that. They intend to bring it forward. And people should understand that that is happening at the same time as this is going to be going on. And I think Councillor Chappelle and others are quite correct. A lot has been done in different things, but it's not coherent, it's not holistic, it's not a whole community approach. And the problem is as big, if not bigger than that, right? We can just do what we can do here. So that's the things I want to stress. I think it's good that these contacts are in it. It's a good start. As I say, it's a precursor to a full strategy. And perhaps we'll learn a considerable amount where the hot spots are, the sharp, pointy ends of sticks are, and that we'll be able to move more quickly as staff rolls out a more holistic approach. And which I'd like to thank them for, because I just had a meeting with them last week. It sounded really good, and I want the rest of the council to know that. And personally for myself, I've gone around, I've talked to all of you, or except one, but he wasn't available, but we will be doing that. And I've talked to Green Centre Canada, some of those groups up there, and I'll just keep doing it, because when we get there, when the CAO or Mr. Hugenbos makes his call, they'll already have an idea about what we're doing. And so that's all I've got to say. I think it's all going to come together. I appreciate all the comments, including some of the mild skepticism about certain aspects of it, because that's part of the process. And we are always going to have to be correcting ourselves. And Keith could do that job, monitor what we are doing and coming up with ideas and critiques, because we're not going to get it right every time. That's why we need a strategy to keep us on track. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. A few moments ago, my colleague, Councillor Stroud, drew from his profession in healthcare to justify something, and it inspired me to draw from my former profession as a teacher, as a history teacher. And I was thinking about one of the primary things that we try to instill in our students. I taught grade 10 history, academic and applied, which is that old quotation I know that we all know. Those who don't remember their past are condemned to repeat it. And it works especially well for me in this moment because I'm reading this book. It just came out this year. It's by an award-winning New York Times journalist called Nathaniel Rich. It's called Losing Earth, A Recent History. And it documents the lack of action over the last 35 to 40 years on the climate file. In 1980, the Ronald Reagan White House commissioned the National Academy of Sciences to bring together stakeholders in a nonpartisan, non-political, community-building endeavor to recommend what they called the carbon dioxide problem and how to act on it. At that time, given global emissions and given the fact that most of the world hadn't industrialized to the degree we see today, it was very clear that if the US got their act together, then the carbon dioxide problem, as it was called then, wouldn't be an issue. They could single-handedly reduce emissions in a way that would keep the world maybe warming, maybe to 1.5 degrees, which we know from the best science is fine, but wouldn't bring catastrophic climate change, as we now call it. And even at that time, in the 1980s, late 1970s, big companies like Shell and Exxon had modeled what we are living now. They knew that if they continued to produce fossil fuel heavy material, that we would see a warming world. So that's back in 1980, and they didn't act. Now the science is also clear that we need these type of nonpartisan, community-based approaches, but it's not just the US that has to act. It's everyone, everywhere. So to the intent of this motion, as Councillor Doherty rightly said, this is not a catch-all. This is not, we are now going to pat ourselves on the back for dealing with climate change. This is one of many things that the city is doing and broadening out to the community to ensure that we act and that we don't keep waiting. Because unlike in the 70s and 80s, we don't have 4 decades, we have 1 to avoid catastrophic climate change, as we now call it. So please vote in favor of this. This is one small step of many that we'll be taking in our term to deal with this very, very pressing issue, an issue that we agreed all together unanimously is an emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanik, you have the last word.
Thank you. I'll just briefly address my counselor across the way. And so all those groups and everything that they've done, that sounds great. That would have required a lot of Googling. What this is going to be information sharing to bring all of that together so that somebody doesn't have to Google what each, institution that you listed there has done and is doing. It's to bring it all together and to look for, the easy ones that maybe everyone can start to do to affect climate change. If anyone doesn't like this motion, they can vote against it. We vote against motions all the time. This is to try to look at the quick wins, come up with one list of actions that all these groups have participated in and contributed to and likely have already actioned, and it's just information sharing, and then maybe some of the other groups can try the same thing. And then that everyone in Kingston will have access to read, to see what all the different ICI sector is doing in Kingston. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we call the vote on new motion number 1 as amended, I need 2 volunteers to fill in the last clause. I have a couple volunteers. Councillor Doherty? Councillor Kiley? Anybody else? Okay, so we will then vote on the motion with Councillor Kiley and Councillor Doherty as listed. Okay, please vote. And that carries by a vote of 11-1. Okay, on to new motion number 2. I'm not the mover or the seconder, but I am actually going to ask if the deputy mayor would take the chair for the second motion.
I will do so.
Thank you.
And that's on the added, so I should pull it out and look at it again. And the mover, I'm sorry, was Councillor Bohm. So would the mover like to speak to?
Point of order.
Yeah. Yeah, I had it here. So, whereas the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, has recently had a resignation on their board for the remaining 2019-2020 term, and whereas AMO is looking to have more mayoral representation from Eastern Ontario on their board of directors, and whereas nominations to the AMO board must be supported by a council motion which indicates the financial support of that council, and whereas the City of Kingston has benefited from having local representation on this important Ontario Municipal Board in the past, and whereas given the current amount of change at the provincial level with legislation and policy implementation, it is critical for the city to be connected to the province through this important municipal association. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the City of Kingston nominates Mayor Patterson for consideration to the board of the Association of the Municipalities of Ontario as a member of the large urban caucus, and that the City of Kingston agrees to cover the travel expenses related to attending meetings. And that was moved by Councillor Bohm and seconded by Councillor Osanek. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I'm not going to belabor this anymore. It's pretty self-evident what this motion means. So I hope we can, due to the late hour, move this along quickly, and I hope it has unanimous support. Thank you.
And your colleagues, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Chappelle.
Yes, to you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to hear some remarks from the mayor on what he would like to see achieved while serving on the board of AMO.
So through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, I'm happy to respond to that. I think that it's the last whereas clause, I think, that provides the motivation for why I'm willing to do this if council is in agreement. I think this is a pretty critical period of time over the next year. There's a lot of change, a lot of key discussions that are going to happen between the province and municipalities. So I think to your point or your question, Councillor Chappelle, what is the objective? I think there's a couple of things. Number one is to ensure that Kingston is well connected into the discussions that are happening right now. I think that that's very, very important for us to make sure that we have update information all the time. And certainly I would be happy to commit to council to bring that back regularly so that everybody around this table can stay in the loop. I think the second piece is for a collective voice to be able to find a right path forward. Obviously, there are some difficult conversations to come, certainly as we look towards our 2020 budget and what that will look like. And so I think that just having that perspective could help us in terms of our own local budgeting, but also to be able to contribute to the important conversation that's happening right now between cities and the province. So that effectively is what I'm looking for.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? I will call the question. And you're unanimously going off to Toronto, I guess. Thank you. I return the chair.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of council for your support. And look forward to updating you with those conversations as they progress in the months to come. Okay, we have no other new motions. Yes, Deputy Mayor Neal. You have yes. So we are on to notices of motion. Deputy Mayor Neal.
Thank you. And it is on the screen. I shared this with staff yesterday, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Holland. Whereas many communities in the United Kingdom, Rotherham, Hull, etc., are replacing boulevard and roadside grass plantings with wildflower verges, and whereas these low-maintenance plantings save tens of thousands of pounds annually in mowing costs while supporting endangered pollinators such as bees and butterflies, and have gained widespread community support while beautifying roadways, Therefore, be it resolved that city staff explore this option and report back to council by Q2 2020 with a recommendation to facilitate a pilot project planting for the summer of 2020, noting possible locations, including Sir John A. Macdonald Boulevard. And be it further resolved that an information report be shared with council in Q4 2020 with recommendations regarding a possible 2021 expansion of the program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no other notices of motion, Mr. Clerk, ask for minutes, please.
Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Doherty, that the minutes of City Council meeting number 2019-16, held Tuesday, June 4th, 2019, be confirmed.
Please vote. And that carries. Some tabling of documents and number of communications. Is there any other business? So I will just remind council that our next meeting starts at 7, starting in July, rather than 7:30. Okay, Mr. Clerk, ask for bylaws, please.
Okay, we have 7 bylaw votes tonight. Councillor Kiley, you're not excused just yet. Councillor McLaren, you're excused for the first 3 bylaw votes, please. Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Bohm, that bylaw 3 be given its first and second reading.
Please vote. And that carries.
Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Bohm, that clause 11.36 of bylaw number 2010-1 be suspended for the purpose of giving bylaw 3 readings.
Please vote.
One more, please.
And that carries.
Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Bohm, that bylaw 3 be given its third reading.
Please vote. And that carries.
Councillor McLaren, you can return. Councillor Kiley, you're excused for the next 2 votes. Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Bohm, that bylaw 4 be given its first and second reading.
Please vote. That carries.
Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Bohm, that bylaw 4 be given its third reading.
Please vote. That carries.
Councillor Kiley, you can return, please. Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Bohm, that bylaws 1, 2, 5 through 16, 20, and 19 be given their first and second reading.
Please vote. That carries.
This is our final bylaw vote, moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Bohm, that bylaws 5 through 18, 20, and 19 be given their third reading.
Please vote.
One more, please.
And that carries. Motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Neal, seconded by Councillor Bohm. Please vote. And that carries. Thank you very much.